The grandest hall of high society sparkles with gold, but beneath its beauty lies a den of vipers. For some, it is a romantic dream, a stage to exchange sweet whispers and tender glances. But beneath the romantic music, venomous rumors and ruthless gossip run rampant through the crowded room. The nobles eagerly tear down her past, mocking her former desperation and questioning her sudden, unimaginable wealth. Envy festers in their hearts, bitter that a once-fallen family could climb to such heights. The woman who vanished in disgrace has returned, turning high society upside down with a single revelation. She is no longer an outcast. She is Judith Meius, the newest pride of the ducal house. Yet they whisper in dark corners, questioning how she could carry the missing heir's child. They eagerly accuse her of deceit, convinced she has spun a web of lies to con the Duchess. A sharp, commanding snap instantly silences the room, freezing the poison on their tongues. The fierce Duchess Meius steps forward, daring anyone to insult the sacred bloodline of her household. Chilled to the bone, the gossipers tremble under the Duchess's suffocating glare, pleading for mercy. With a dismissive glance, the Duchess sweeps her daughter-in-law away, leaving the trivial pests behind. Side by side, the two powerful women depart, leaving the stunned ballroom in absolute silence. Their steady, resounding footsteps echo down the grand hall, signaling an era of untouchable power. As the heavy doors shut, the suffocating toxicity of high society is finally locked away. Stepping into safety, Judith lets out a heavy sigh, the suffocating tension finally washing off her. But the Duchess's cold fury remains, quietly promising ruin to those who dared whisper. Behind them, the stunned nobles can only watch in awe of this undeniable display of doting protection. Yet the ultimate mystery looms over them all. Where is the missing heir, and Meius? Inside the carriage, the Duchess explains that their public appearance has successfully halted any declaration of Ekin's death. A heavy silence falls as the Duchess turns her sharp, calculating gaze directly onto Judith. Feeling the sudden, intense scrutiny, Judith flinches, her breath catching in her throat. Hoping to ease the tension, Judith offers to return the lavish jewels and dress once they arrive. But her mother-in-law scoffs, declaring that the Meius name would never take back gifts from their family. Stunned by the Duchess's fierce and sudden generosity, Judith can only nod in quiet understanding. A rare, subtle warmth softens the Duchess's strict features as she accepts her daughter-in-law's compliance. Smiling softly, Judith realizes that beneath the sharp words lies a deeply caring heart looking out for her. Being the contract daughter-in-law of a notorious villainous family is turning out better than she ever imagined. After years of running from ruthless debt collectors, this sudden, pampered life of luxury feels like a dream. Since her contract is temporary, she resolves to enjoy this safe haven, certain the missing Duke will never return. But her peaceful illusion instantly shatters when a chilling voice slices through the quiet night. Standing before them is a specter from the past, his imposing silhouette stopping the carriage cold. The Duchess gasps in complete disbelief, recognizing her long-lost son, and Meius, standing in the moonlight. Judith freezes in pure shock as the returned Duke locks his piercing gaze onto her. Standing face to face, the two strangers are suddenly bound by a dangerous lie made real. Panic grips her soul as the safe world she built begins to crumble around her. How is this possible? The man she claimed as her husband was supposed to be dead. Ekin steps closer, his red eyes gleaming with secrets that threaten to consume her entirely. In her shock, memories of her tragic past flash before her eyes, beginning with her father's ruinous death. Left with nothing but a mountain of debt, she was heartlessly abandoned and cast onto the cold streets. In her darkest hour of despair, the sudden awakening of her past life's memories changed everything. The vivid details of a novel flooded her mind, driving her to run through the streets to confirm the truth. She realized she was trapped in a tragic romance where the heroine suffered endless hardships before finding love. Driven by desperation, she sought out the heroine to prove if her written fate was real. Reaching a small flower shop, she finally found the unmistakable protagonist of the story. But her relief was short-lived as a shocking realization left her utterly paralyzed. The main plot had not even begun. The destined heroine was still just a helpless child. Staring at the young girl, Judith realized she would have to survive the coming storm entirely on her own. With ruthless loan sharks closing in, her desperate struggle for survival was only just beginning. In her mind, the cruel echoes of her past replayed, mocking voices urging her to sell herself to a wealthy older man and cold rejections from fair-weather friends who turned their backs on her desperation. With a sudden ragged gasp, Judith jolts awake in her bed, her heart hammering against her ribs as she realizes it was only a nightmare. Clasping her throbbing head, she sighs deeply, recognizing that while she prepared herself for this harsh reality, facing it is far more grueling than she ever anticipated. Surveying her bleak, cramped room, a heavy sense of dread settles over her, knowing that this waking life is far worse than any nightmare. Shaking off her despair, she sits up with newfound determination, refusing to waste another precious second wallowing in self-pity when her survival is at stake. Seated at her desk under the dim candlelight, she resolved to plan her next moves, knowing her ultimate weapon was her perfect memory of the novel's future. Charting out the story's timeline, she noted that the prologue begins with a devastating street fire when the heroine is 15, leaving 5 long years before the main plot truly commences. Though she remembered every written word of the novel, she faced a massive hurdle. There was absolutely nothing in the main plot she could exploit this early on. Pausing with her pen in hand, a sudden spark of inspiration struck her. If she couldn't rely on the protagonists, she would have to utilize the villains. A brilliant smile spread across her face as her mind locked onto the perfect target, the notorious and incredibly wealthy Meius ducal house. She recalled Karl Meius, the tragic villain of the novel who tortured the heroine, driven to madness by the childhood disappearance of his eldest brother, Meius. Under imperial law, if a person remains missing for 5 years, they are legally declared dead, a fate the grieving Meius family desperately wished to avoid. To stall this declaration, the Duchess devised a desperate scheme, hiring a maid as a contract daughter-in-law and claiming she carried Ekian's unborn child. But this desperate lie backfired terribly on young Karl, molding his innocent heart into a twisted and resentful nightmare. He was subtly and cruelly abused by the wicked maid who took the contract, a tragedy Judith realized she could easily rewrite. An ambitious gleam lit up her eyes as she resolved to seize that contract role for herself, turning a tragic fate into her golden ticket. By stepping into the lion's den, she could protect young Karl from abuse while securing the astronomical wealth she needed to survive. Setting her plan in motion, she arrived at the mysterious and elusive gray information brokerage, the heart of the city's secrets. Stepping inside the lavish, sunlit office, the receptionist formally greeted her, unaware of the storm this young woman was about to bring. Brimming with confidence, Judith announced she was there to sell valuable information, prompting the receptionist to politely listen to her offer. But when Judith demanded to speak with the master directly, the receptionist hesitated, stating that such private meetings were strictly forbidden. Feigning deep disappointment, Judith playfully pouted, asking if she was being dismissed simply because of her youthful appearance. Leaning in with a knowing, mischievous wink, she casually dropped a bombshell. She knew the mysterious master was also just a minor. Stunned into silence, the receptionist could only sweat and panic under Judith's remarkably sharp and playful gaze. Before the clerk could recover, the heavy office door clicked open and a deep, smooth voice echoed through the room, admitting his curiosity about this unusual guest. Stepping into the light was a tall, imposing man wearing an elegant white masquerade mask, his sharp gaze instantly locking onto Judith. Underneath the mask, his crimson eyes gleamed with amusement, a deadly charm radiating from his striking silhouette. This was the master of the Grey Information Guild, an organization growing at a terrifying rate under his brilliant leadership. Though destined to burn down in the novel's prologue, its highly reliable intelligence was so legendary that the future male lead would deeply mourn its loss. Over the next 3 years, Judith steadily sold minor secrets to the guild, rising to the status of a cherished VIP guest who even received a beautiful coming-of-age bouquet from the master himself. Accepting the lavish bouquet, Judith casually asked how he had discovered her birthday, given that she had never shared that detail with him. Chuckling softly, the master replied that as the head of an information guild, such details were trivial, playfully turning her own logic back on her. He leaned in, his piercing red eyes searching hers as he questioned how a seemingly ordinary lady like her knew so many hidden secrets. Waving her hand dismissively, Judith lied smoothly, claiming she merely picked up stray rumors while wandering the streets to pay off her immense debts. But the master wasn't easily fooled, pointing out that the uncanny 100% accuracy of her information was far from ordinary. Internally, Judith smirked, knowing her secrets were flawless because they came straight from the novel, though she carefully kept them trivial to avoid altering the timeline. Sipping her tea, she knew that earning his trust over the years was a massive triumph, and today that connection would finally yield its true reward. Putting her cup down, Judith smiled warmly, declaring that today she had come both to sell a valuable secret and to make a monumental purchase. Intrigued, the master noted that this was the very first time she had ever sought to buy information from his guild. His voice dripped with anticipation as he gestured for her to speak, eager to hear what high-class secret she was willing to pay a fortune for. Leaning forward, Judith quietly uttered the name that would change everything, Meius, causing the master's gloved hand to freeze in midair. Looking him dead in the eye, she repeated her demand clearly, requesting any and all intelligence on the missing heir. She knew Ekian was a brilliant and highly capable young duke who had vanished without a trace, a mystery the novel itself never fully explained. With the 5-year deadline fast approaching, she knew the Meius family would soon seek their fake daughter-in-law, and she was absolutely determined to steal that spot. The master hummed thoughtfully, his sharp mind assessing her sudden and highly dangerous request. He questioned why she was so intent on investigating a man who had been missing for 5 years, but Judith quickly corrected him, noting that the deadline hadn't passed yet. Narrowing his crimson eyes, the master pressed further, demanding to know what business she could possibly have with the lost duke. Blushing slightly, Judith offered a playful, harmless excuse, admitting she had developed a bit of an interest in him. Amused, the master took a sip of his tea, but instantly spat it out in pure shock when Judith cheerfully specified that it was a romantic interest. Coughing frantically as he wiped his mouth, the master could only stare at her in utter disbelief, completely derailed by her outrageous claim. Feigning deep offense at his dramatic reaction, Judith playfully protests, asking why he would assume her only drive was money. She casually notes that the lost duke's legendary perfection makes it completely natural for any lady to harbor a crush. When the master points out they have never met, she readily admits to simply admiring him from afar without any formal connection. Turning the tables, Judith commends the master's own incredible intelligence, noting how surprisingly well-informed he is about the Duke. Seizing the opportunity, she eagerly presses him for the Duke's current whereabouts and the true reasons behind his sudden disappearance.
She looks up with hopeful, sparkling green eyes, desperately wishing to hear any shred of news regarding her supposed love.
But the master simply shakes his head, admitting that even his vast information network holds next to nothing on the man. He explains his knowledge only spans before the disappearance, warning her that no guild in the world can track him now. He solemnly suggests it may be time to let the Duke go, hinting that disappearance might have been exactly what he desired. He points out that the family's painful wait will inevitably end once the legal 5-year declaration of death is finalized. Expressing sincere regret, the master confirms there is absolutely no active lead he can provide on the missing heir. Judith silently observes his demeanor, realizing his absolute denial is entirely genuine and not a ploy to withhold secrets. Sighing softly, she feels a pang of disappointment, having hoped her hard-earned VIP status would grant her some legendary breakthrough. Her mind races with doubt, wondering how an alive, highly capable nobleman could vanish so perfectly without leaving a single trace. Remembering that the novel's climax never mentioned his return, a chilling question grips her heart. Could he truly be dead? Shaking off the grim thought, she decides to believe that a man of his talent must be thriving peacefully somewhere out of sight. She reassures herself that her plan will succeed perfectly so long as no impossible variable like the Duke suddenly returning occurs. Breaking her train of thought, the master leans forward to address her, his curiosity still clearly piqued. He awkwardly questions how she fell so deeply for a missing stranger, only for her to offer a hilariously simple answer: he is handsome. Unabashedly, Judith declares that she prioritizes looks above all else, maintaining her playful cover with absolute confidence. She cheerfully chalks the inquiry up to a coming-of-age whim, gracefully letting the matter drop since the guild has no answers. Steering the conversation back to business, the master asks about the valuable secret she originally came to sell him. Requesting a pen, Judith prepares to share a crucial piece of knowledge, despite knowing she cannot fully charge its true worth. As her hand moves swiftly across the parchment, the master watches in surprise as a detailed map of the local area takes shape. She marks a specific, dangerous location on the map, identifying it as a highly secretive black market shop operating right under his nose. She delivers a shocking warning. A massive cache of explosives is stored there, poised to reduce the entire street to ash if left ignored. Realizing the gravity of her warning, the master tenses, agreeing to settle her payment once this looming threat is neutralized. With a charming smile, Judith generously offers to deduct the price of his birthday bouquet from her final fee. Stepping out into the bright city streets, she feels confident that the highly efficient master will dismantle the dangerous shop in time. Though she preferred to keep the timeline intact until her contract was secure, some tragedies were simply too horrific to ignore. Over the past 3 years, she had deliberately avoided exploiting major novel secrets to prevent a chaotic butterfly effect from ruining her future. By sticking only to minor, harmless gossip, she had managed to earn a steady living while keeping the timeline perfectly stable. Altering the devastating fire will undoubtedly change the story's trajectory, yet she refused to let innocent lives perish just for a script. With the impending disaster hopefully averted, she takes a deep breath and prepares for her own ultimate trial. She reasons that even if the timeline shifts, it shouldn't interfere with her plan to secure the Meius family contract. By stepping in, she would protect the young Carl and ease the heroine's future burdens, creating a win-win scenario for everyone. After faking a miscarriage to end the contract, she will take her astronomical fortune and disappear, starting her journey tomorrow. Standing before the grand gates of the Meius estate, the stern head butler politely receives the unexpected guest. When Judith insists she has urgent news about the lost heir, the butler coldly explains that audiences require a formal request. Unrolling his extensive schedule, the butler checks the Duchess's long list of appointments to determine her earliest availability. He delivers a crushing blow, calmly stating she would have to wait nearly 3 months just to be considered. Judith freezes in absolute dismay, her carefully calculated timeline suddenly threatened by this massive, unexpected bureaucratic delay. She realizes the duchy is plagued by desperate opportunists telling fake stories about the Duke, making them highly suspicious of newcomers. Knowing she cannot afford to let another imposter steal her place during this long wait, she refuses to back down. Deciding to play her absolute trump card, Judith leans in to whisper an undeniable, highly classified secret about the Duke's childhood. She reveals an intimate, forgotten detail, how the young heir refused to eat pomegranates as a child because they looked gross. The butler's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as he realizes this bizarre, highly specific habit could only be known by family. Flashing a victorious smile, she mockingly asks if she should still return in 3 months, knowing she has him completely cornered. Shortly after, Judith is escorted inside, where the desperate Duchess herself brings up the stunning pomegranate secret.
The Duchess admits she's clutching at straws, warning Judith that countless liars have already failed to deceive her before. Coldly narrowing her eyes, the Duchess delivers a chilling warning about the brutal fate awaiting any fraud. Unfazed by the unspoken threat, Judith merely smiles, fully prepared to face her ultimate test. With absolute composure, Judith declares she is here to propose a monumental deal, catching the Duchess completely off guard. Acknowledging that the pomegranate detail could be uncovered with enough digging, Judith plays her absolute trump card, instructing the Duchess to send a servant to the young Duke's bedroom immediately. A tense silence fills the lavish room as the Duchess absorbs the highly specific and bizarre instructions. Judith calmly asserts that their true negotiation will only begin once the letter's existence is verified. Desperate for any trace of her son, the Duchess rings her bell and commands her maid to retrieve the hidden letter. The loyal maid bows quickly, immediately rushing off to execute the Duchess's urgent and highly confidential command. Judith recalls from the novel that the hidden note was simply a warm letter of gratitude destined to be found by the story's villain if she didn't utilize it first. Watching the notoriously cold Duchess tremble with anxious hope before the proof even arrives, Judith is deeply moved by the raw power of a parent's love. A sharp knock shatters the heavy silence of the parlor, signaling the maid's swift return. Tense with overwhelming anticipation, the Duchess rises to meet her maid, demanding to know what was found. With utmost care, the maid presents a sealed white envelope recovered from the secret hollow in the wall. Tears well in the Duchess's eyes as she clutches the paper, overwhelmed by a shock that pierces her very soul. Staring at the familiar strokes, she weeps as she confirms the writing belongs to her beloved missing son. Looking at Judith with desperate intensity, the Duchess begs to know how she uncovered the secret, pleading for any news of his current whereabouts. Clenching her fists, she declares she would mobilize the entire duchy's power and do absolutely anything just to see him once more. Witnessing the mother's intense grief, Judith quietly wonders why Ekian ever left such a loving family, a warmth she herself never knew. Steeling herself, the Duchess demands to know Judith's price, willing to grant any desire in exchange for her knowledge. Judith gently clarifies that she cannot reveal his location, but has come instead to present a mutually beneficial proposal. She reveals she knows of the Duchess's desperate struggle to delay her son's legal declaration of death, offering a solution directly tied to that ticking clock. Knowing the Duchess needs time to investigate her background, Judith gracefully suggests they reconvene in 2 days to finalize the arrangement. Reluctantly agreeing to the delay, the Duchess schedules their decisive meeting for 2 mornings from now as Judith expresses her gratitude. Back on the bustling city streets, Judith exhales a massive sigh of relief, thanking her thorough memory of the novel for surviving the Duchess's oppressive aura. Yet, a lingering doubt creeps in as she questions how her memory became so unnaturally sharp, recalling even the most trivial literary details. Her thoughts are interrupted by the hushed whispers of passing citizens, gossiping about a massive cache of explosives recently neutralized nearby. Satisfied that the guildmaster acted swiftly to prevent the tragedy, Judith accepts that altering the timeline was a risk well worth saving innocent lives. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out to her, breaking her reverie in the middle of the street. Turning around, she finds the masked guildmaster towering before her, his crimson eyes gleaming with intense curiosity. Playfully noting how his massive frame blocks the sunlight, she listens as he points out her exhausted expression, demanding to know where she vanished to. When Judith casually mentions visiting the Meius duchy, the master's posture tenses as he presses her for her business with the powerful family. Smiling mysteriously, she decides to share her plan directly, knowing his vast information network would eventually uncover it anyway. Leaning in close, she drops a massive bombshell, cheerfully announcing her intention to marry into the prestigious Meius family. Stunned into a rare, absolute silence, the master can only stare at her, completely speechless at her sheer audacity. Rubbing his temples, he desperately tries to process the absurdity, demanding confirmation of her insane declaration. Highly confused, he points out that the current young master of the household is a mere child of 8, making a marriage completely impossible. Laughing, Judith clarifies that she has no interest in a child. Her target is the legendary missing young Duke himself. The master is utterly bewildered, questioning if she is truly aiming to marry the long-lost Ekian Meius. He grips his head in disbelief, pointing out the absolute insanity of trying to marry a man who has been missing for 5 years. Judith playfully turns his own words back on him, reminding him that he claimed to know nothing about the missing heir. Flashing a confident wink, she cheerfully advises him to simply stand back and watch, as her flawless intuition has never once failed her. Watching her walk away, the master reflects on how Judith Eileen has always been an incredibly bizarre and unpredictable woman. He remembers how she would suddenly appear out of nowhere, delivering impossibly accurate secrets while keeping her sources completely hidden. But now that she has reached adulthood, her strange antics have escalated into something entirely unfathomable. It was ridiculous enough when she claimed to have a crush on a stranger, but declaring an intent to marry him is pure madness. To make matters worse, she is aiming for a man who is legally about to be declared dead, leaving him completely baffled. He paces by the window, unable to comprehend the logic of marrying a ghost who isn't even there to consent. He knows Judith is far too clever and honest to run a cheap scam, yet the formidable Meius family is certainly not an easy target to swindle. No matter how he analyzes it, the entire situation is completely nonsensical, pointing to deep secrets she refuses to share. Gripping the windowsill in sheer frustration, the master is left thoroughly vexed, entirely consumed by the mystery of her impossible plan. Safely hidden behind closed doors, Judith Meius, the elusive master of the Information Bureau, quietly processes the absolute absurdity of her proposal. Years ago, he had willingly walked away from his birthright to ensure his young brother Carl would inherit the family legacy. He knew his self-imposed exile was the only way to protect the succession from being contested by greedy factions. Having spent 5 painstaking years erasing every trace of his past life, Judith's sudden marriage proposal threatened to shatter his perfect anonymity. He found the notion of her romantic affection preposterous, given her extremely isolated position within high society. It seemed impossible that a debt-ridden baroness like her could ever cross paths with his true identity. Yep. He recalled his original plan to quietly pay off her family's massive debts as a silent reward for saving countless lives. Returning to her now felt entirely too awkward, especially since her grueling tutoring schedule would likely keep her occupied anyway. By any logical metric, her frantic daily routine easily made her one of the busiest citizens in the entire capital. Yet, despite the crushing weight of her circumstances, he had never once seen her gaze lose its bright, defiant spark. She consistently met every harsh adversity with an unyielding optimism, treating monumental struggles as if they were simple, everyday tasks. Recognizing she was far too honorable to run a cheap scam, he resolves to summon her again to uncover her true motives. Dipping his pen, he prepares to write, determined to finally unravel the mystery of her bizarre marriage scheme. The following morning, Judith steps out into the crisp early air, quietly realizing she left her home far too early. Her thoughts are suddenly broken by a deep, highly formal voice delivering an unexpected greeting in the middle of the street. Bowing respectfully, the messenger announces that the Duchess herself has ordered them to escort Judith to the estate as an honored guest. When Judith requests a brief moment to cancel her tutoring sessions, the butler politely informs her that the matter has already been taken care of. Stunned by their terrifying, relentless efficiency, she realizes the powerful duchy has completely cleared her schedule for the entire day. Assuring him it is no trouble, she follows his lead toward the grand carriage waiting just beyond the narrow market streets. Judith marvels at the family's immense reach, yet wonders how such an influential power could fail to locate their own missing heir. She reasons that with the striking legendary blonde hair of the Meius bloodline, the lost duke would surely stand out in any crowd. The near-impossible nature of remaining hidden for 5 long years makes her quietly wonder if he has already met a tragic end. Or perhaps he chose to hide away to spare his beloved family the painful agony of watching him succumb to a terminal illness. If such a heartbreaking truth were real, his desperate decision to abandon his vast wealth and family would finally make perfect sense. Shaken off her melancholic thoughts, she gracefully accepts the butler's hand and steps into the luxurious carriage. As the heavy wooden doors snap shut, a tense silence fills the cabin, signaling the official beginning of her ultimate gamble. She takes a deep, steadying breath, fully aware that the moment to alter her destiny has finally arrived. Arriving at the grand estate, the Duchess reveals she bypassed their scheduled meeting after completing a swift, incredibly thorough investigation into her background. Undeterred by the invasive probe, Judith calmly brushes off the intrusion as a fair response to her own unannounced visit. For the anxious mother, the mere 24 hours since their first encounter had felt like an agonizing, endless eternity. Casting aside all formal pleasantries, the Duchess demands to know the exact nature of the bold proposal Judith promised to deliver. Judith highlights the ticking clock, reminding her that the 5-year legal deadline to declare the young duke dead is fast approaching. She delivers a staggering bombshell, revealing she is fully aware of the Duchess's secret, highly desperate plan to announce a fake pregnancy. By claiming an unborn child carries the legendary Meius energy, the family can legally stall the declaration, as a dead man cannot father an heir. The Duchess inwardly reels, knowing that because only the duke can verify the bloodline, no noble would dare challenge his personal acknowledgement. Yet, both women quietly recognize that such a desperate deception is merely a fragile, fleeting illusion that will only buy a few months. Clenching her fists, the pained mother begs to know if there is any way to tell her son that his place is still waiting for him. Judith gently delivers the crushing truth that the young duke will never return, regardless of the clever schemes they weave. Seizing the moment, Judith makes her move, boldly offering to step into the role of the faked contract daughter-in-law. She proposes to play the part of the expectant mother, only to stage a clean, tragic miscarriage a few months later to dissolve the tie. Taken aback by the sheer audacity, the Duchess warns her of the severe, irreversible consequences of playing such a dangerous game. She explains that the permanent brand of a divorce and a faked miscarriage will forever ruin Judith's standing in high society. A heavy silence descends upon the room as the stark, chilling reality of social exile hangs vividly in the air. The Duchess studies her guest intensely, searching for any flicker of fear, hesitation, or regret in her green eyes. Judith calmly counters, reminding her that a mountain of crushing family debt leaves her absolutely no luxury to worry about noble dignity. Facing the grim reality of daily survival, she declares that the trivial concerns of high society are nothing more than meaningless illusions. The Duchess is utterly stunned by her absolute composure, deeply moved by the incredible steel forged by Judith's harsh life. Later, in the quiet confines of her study, the Duchess reviews the background investigation with her trusted butler. The butler reports that Judith's history is remarkably clean, save for her curious habit of selling minor tutor gossip to an information bureau. Yet, the Duchess remains deeply unsettled, knowing that even the most elite information network could never have uncovered the secret letter. The Duchess is deeply unsettled, unable to comprehend how Judith could have possibly known about her highly secretive plan to delay the official death report. Reviewing the investigation with her butler, she remains thoroughly baffled by how a minor baroness who never left the capital could possess such forbidden knowledge. Cornered, Judith calmly attributes her terrifyingly accurate insights to prophetic childhood dreams, while maintaining she knows nothing of the missing Duke's current location. Though the explanation sounds entirely absurd, the desperate mother has no choice but to accept it, offering a quiet, reluctant word of thanks. Shifting her tone to a cold, calculating edge, the Duchess questions Judith's absolute lack of negotiation skills. She points out that if Judith truly wanted this high-stakes gamble to succeed, she shouldn't have admitted that Ekian would never return. A cunning negotiator would have spun a web of convenient lies about his return or simply kept quiet to maintain maximum leverage. The Duchess is genuinely intrigued, wondering why someone who claims noble honor as a luxury would choose to be so detrimentally, painfully honest. In her decades of navigating high society, she knows that exposing one's own severe disadvantage before a deal closes always points to a deeper motive. She leans back, her purple eyes piercing through the silence as she searches Judith's face for any hidden agenda. She demands to know the underlying logic behind such reckless transparency, questioning her bizarre approach to a life-altering negotiation. With unwavering focus, the Duchess presses her guest to reveal the true reason behind her baffling honesty. The heavy tension in the grand study peaks as the formidable matriarch awaits a satisfying explanation. Judith looks back without a single flinch, calmly admitting that she has indeed abandoned her pride and dignity as a noble. Smiling with absolute radiant warmth, she declares that she has not, however, abandoned her fundamental integrity as a human being. She acknowledges her desperate need for massive wealth, a stark reality already uncovered by the family's thorough background check. Yet she refuses to secure her survival by cruelly exploiting a mother's fragile hope with cheap manipulative lies. She reiterates that her proposed scheme is a pragmatic deal to buy time, and pretending the young Duke will return would only waste their resources. With unwavering resolve, Judith formally offers to step into the role of the contract daughter-in-law, promising to fulfill her duties without causing a single scandal. Deeply moved by the young woman's fierce, unyielding honor, the Duchess quietly decides to entrust the family's fragile future to her. The cold defensive wall between the two women finally crumbles, replaced by a profound mutual understanding. Locking eyes with her new ally, the Duchess officially declares her acceptance, ready to set the dangerous plan in motion. Seizing the momentum, Judith suggests filling out the official marriage registration immediately to stay ahead of the rapidly ticking clock. The Duchess agrees but strictly reinforces that this is a purely professional transaction, warning Judith never to interfere with internal household affairs. She also demands an ironclad clause for a swift divorce upon Ekian's return, determined to let her eldest son marry for true love. Brushing aside the terrifying threat of permanent social exile, Judith accepts the condition with a cheerful, unbothered smile. To her utter shock, the Duchess casually offers to clear her entire family debt as an advance, promising an identical fortune upon completion. Dismissing the massive sum as pocket change, the Duchess immediately orders a certified check bearing the prestigious Meius family seal. Overwhelmed by the sudden, unimaginable windfall, Judith frantically pinches her own cheeks, desperately trying to confirm she hasn't fallen asleep. Realizing the sheer gravity of her success, she gasps as the crushing weight of her lifelong struggles instantly evaporates. Swept up in a wave of profound relief, she bows deeply, tearfully declaring the Duchess to be her ultimate savior. Clutching her hands to her chest, Judith's heart swells with an emotion she hasn't felt in years, true, unburdened hope. Highly flustered by the intense display of affection, the Duchess quickly turns away, huffing that she only did it for her own convenience. Later, a thoroughly stunned loan shark officially confirms that her massive, lifelong debts have been completely paid off in full. When the lender playfully suggests they might do business again, Judith vehemently vows she will never borrow a single coin as long as she lives. The lender can only marvel at her incredible tenacity, utterly shocked that a gambler's daughter actually stayed to pay back the principal. Watching her walk away, he comments on how children ultimately end up resembling their parents in the most unexpected ways. Smiling brightly, Judith silently agrees that she too played a massive gamble, except hers was a high-stakes play with her very life on the line. Stepping out of the dusty debt office, she takes a long, deeply cathartic breath of the crisp capital air. Tears of pure joy slip down her cheeks as she celebrates her miraculous freedom from the heavy shackles that bound her family for years. She marvels at the incredible speed of her triumph, feeling endlessly grateful for the Duchess's swift and decisive generosity. Knowing she received far too great a reward, she resolves to work twice as hard, starting with gathering critical information about her new family. Realizing she needs a powerful network, Judith decides to visit the Information Bureau, remembering the Master's timely summons. Upon her arrival, the master immediately questions her whereabouts, noting she has been at the Duke's estate since early morning.
Judith cheerfully drops a massive bombshell, casually revealing that she completed her marriage registration and will soon announce a fake pregnancy.
Absolutely shattered by the sheer absurdity of her declaration, the master stands completely paralyzed, his mind failing to process the news.
Judith is thoroughly amused, highly confused by why a simple marriage announcement would break his legendary, unshakable composure. Flashing a playful, teasing wink, she jokingly asks if his extreme shock is due to a secret one-sided crush on her. The master flatly and aggressively rejects her ridiculous romantic theory, desperately trying to steady his rapidly beating heart.
Judith playfully presses him further, pointing out that his utter devastation is incredibly suspicious if he has no personal feelings involved.
The guildmaster scoffs at the absolute absurdity of her fake pregnancy, but Judith quickly retorts, pointing out that he has no right to judge the lie unless he is secretly the missing duke himself. He sighs deeply, reminding her that she has barely even come of age, making a sudden pregnancy mathematically impossible, which only makes Judith clap her hands in belated realization. Laughing off the oversight, Judith cheerfully thanks him for pointing out the massive flaw in her timeline, promising to adjust her story accordingly. Brushing aside the danger of being caught, she wonders aloud if his sudden invitation to meet today was simply his way of expressing gratitude. Shifting to a surprisingly soft, sincere tone, the master bows his head, warmly thanking her for saving his life, his subordinates, and the entire district. Judith grins, reminding him that his trust and his willingness to clean up the messy aftermath of the investigation were equally vital to their survival. While Judith quietly wonders how much her life's rescue might be worth in tradable secrets, the master completely stuns her by offering to pay off her entire family debt. He insists that even a massive fortune is a trivial price to pay for a human life, leaving Judith frozen in a stunned, speechless silence. Setting her teacup down with a quiet sigh, she casually drops the news that her crippling debts have already been completely cleared. She sheepishly confesses that she used the massive advance from the Meius ducal family to settle the score, hiding her face in embarrassment. The master is utterly dumbfounded as he realizes she is using a fake pregnancy to stall the young duke's official death declaration. Though he warns her that the truth will inevitably come to light and destroy her, Judith remains resolute, fully prepared to bear the permanent brand of a divorced mother. She playfully shrugs, telling him that since the die is already cast, his only job now is to keep her secret as repayment for his life. Seizing the perfect opportunity, she eagerly decides to cash in her favor right away. When she asks for deep intelligence on the Meius family, the master quickly demurs, claiming his guild has no eyes or ears inside the ducal estate. He suggests she simply investigate from within once she marries, but Judith strictly rejects the idea, knowing she will only ever be a highly scrutinized outsider. Terrified for her safety, he offers to pay any breach of contract penalty if she backs out now, but Judith sadly declines, knowing she has already crossed the point of no return. He leans forward, his piercing gaze demanding to know what desperate motive, other than money, could possibly drive her into such a dangerous den of lions. Meeting his eyes with absolute gravity, Judith confesses that there is a dark, impending tragedy waiting inside that estate that she simply cannot ignore. If history plays out as it did in the original novel, the Duke's vulnerable second son will soon face a horrific, life-threatening fate. Her true mission as the contract daughter-in-law is to protect Carl, the tragic young boy destined to become the story's ultimate villain. Left entirely alone after his brother's mysterious disappearance and his parents' sudden deaths, young Carl was driven into a state of absolute heartbreaking despair. Prey to the cruelty of the world, the defenseless child was systematically subjected to horrific hidden abuse during his darkest hours. The culprit behind this torment was Sarah, a deceitful maid who managed to usurp the role of the contract daughter-in-law in the original timeline. Under the oblivious noses of the Duke and Duchess, Sarah ruthlessly exploited Carl's fragile mental state, establishing a cruel reign of terror that Judith must stop at all costs. But navigating the estate is a logistical nightmare. Judith is a highly suspicious newcomer, while Sarah is an established, trusted fixture of the household. A single misstep or obvious inquiry from Judith would immediately alert the abusive maid and place the young boy in even greater danger. Pulling her back from her dark thoughts, the master quietly asks if her grim premonitions are truly real. When she admits she has to find another way since his guild is useless here, he urgently demands that she tell him the entire story. She hesitates, stating this highly sensitive information is not for sale, but he fiercely promises to stand by her side and help. When she points out his self-proclaimed lack of knowledge about the Meius family, he desperately backtracks, loudly insisting that he actually knows them incredibly well. Caught red-handed in a blatant contradiction, the master awkwardly clears his throat as Judith glares at him with utter disbelief. Feigning deep heartbreak, Judith theatrically wipes away fake tears, lamenting how her ultimate trust was met with such cheap, deceitful lies. While he laments that some secrets must be kept, Judith points out the absolute unfairness, reminding him that she trusted him with the scandalous details of her fake pregnancy. He buries his face in his hands, sighing that his professional position strictly forbids him from revealing everything, even to his savior.
Pouting playfully, Judith mockingly notes that apparently a life-saving debt means very little to the great, unyielding information guildmaster. When she accuses him of lying about his informants, she is highly amused as he adamantly defends his honor, insisting he truly doesn't have spies inside the estate. Shaking his head, the master admits with a soft laugh that his legendary, unshakable composure completely dissolves whenever he is around her. Unmoved by his smooth words, Judith demands that he stop dodging the subject and finally offer some actual, practical help. A heavy, expectant silence falls over the lavishly decorated study as she waits for his next move. Setting his teacup down with a sharp, decisive click, the master prepares to make a major concession. Looking directly at her, he drops a massive secret, revealing that he knows of a hidden passage leading straight into the Duke's estate. He explains that he acquired the highly restricted architectural blueprints of the secret tunnels long ago, asking if this forbidden layout will suffice. Judith's eyes light up with sudden hope, realizing she can use these hidden pathways to sneak directly into Carl's private quarters without alerting Sarah. When she eagerly asks for a copy of the map, the master shakes his head, refusing to simply hand over such highly dangerous information. He explains that the labyrinthine passages are far too complex for an amateur, warning her that she would surely get lost or captured in the vast estate. To her utter shock, he offers to personally accompany her through the dark tunnels, a proposal that leaves Judith feeling immensely reassured. Moving quickly to the logistics, he asks about her strategy, to which she replies that they must begin with a quiet stakeout of Carl's room. Standing up immediately, the master insists they set off at once, catching her completely off guard with his sudden intense urgency. Reminded of the critical danger facing the innocent young boy, Judith quickly gathers her things, eagerly following her new ally into the shadows. Judith is taken aback by his sudden initiative, wondering if the elusive guildmaster secretly harbors a gentle soft spot for children. Stepping into a crumbling, forgotten cabin, she marvels at the sheer impossibility of a hidden passage leading directly to the Grand Ducal estate. As they descend the dusty stone steps, Judith asks how he could possibly uncover such closely guarded layout secrets, only to receive a casual, evasive answer. She offers a playful smile, secretly amused by the irony of questioning the Grand Master of the Information Guild about his sources. The master turns to her with absolute gravity, pleading with her to keep this dangerous entryway a secret from the Duke and Duchess, though Judith grows highly concerned about the estate's compromised security. Guiding her deeper, he swears that he is the sole living soul who knows of this route, leaving her to wonder who originally revealed the secret layout to him. With a blunt, startling declaration, the master reveals that the original creators of the passage are long dead, leaving Judith completely wide-eyed in dramatic shock. Halting before a heavy stone door, he softly announces that the true, uncharted labyrinth begins just beyond this threshold. Staring into the colossal, mist-shrouded corridors of the ancient catacombs, Judith immediately realizes why a simple paper map would be utterly useless in such a dark maze. Gently reaching out, the master urges her to stay close and follow his lead, warning her that a single wrong turn could lose her in the darkness forever. Meeting his gaze, Judith nods softly, promising to remain careful and follow his every step through the shadows. As their footsteps echo softly in tandem, Judith is suddenly caught off guard by a highly unexpected question from the master. He points out that once her fake marriage falls apart, it will be virtually impossible for her to ever marry a respected nobleman again. Looking down with quiet contemplation, Judith confesses that she is not particularly concerned about preserving a traditional noble reputation. Memories of her lonely childhood resurface, highlighting how she was never taught the concepts of noble honor or dignity by her neglectful, distant parents. She recalls her parents' completely failed marriage, remembering how her father was always absent and how her mother eventually ran away with a household servant. Even as a young girl clutching her books, Judith couldn't help but feel that her mother made the right choice, seeing how genuinely happy she had been with the commoner she loved. Back in the present, she firmly states that she doesn't mind marrying outside of high society as long as her future husband is responsible and hardworking. The master's voice wavers slightly, clearly taken aback by her complete willingness to marry a mere commoner. With a lighthearted chuckle, Judith explains that a simple life is infinitely better than enduring a toxic noble household like the one her debt-ridden father built. Smiling brightly, she adds one final, absolutely non-negotiable condition for her future partner, causing the master to clench his fist in anticipation. She boldly declares that her husband must be undeniably handsome, earning a wry, amused remark from the master about her unwavering consistency. Finally reaching the end of the tunnel, a sliver of bright light pierces the darkness as the master whispers that they have arrived inside Carl's private wardrobe. With a slow, agonizingly quiet turn of the brass ring, the heavy wooden doors begin to creak open just a fraction. Squeezed tightly between rows of hanging clothes, the two find themselves forced into an incredibly intimate, breathless proximity. Leaning close, the master points out a small gap in the wooden panels, allowing them a perfect, unobstructed view of the young boy's bedroom. Pressing forward to peer through the slit, Judith swallows hard, suddenly overwhelmed by the intense physical closeness of their hiding spot. Surrounded by the faint scent of flowers, she is momentarily distracted, unable to ignore how incredibly well-built and broad the master's chest is. She reflects on her past life of relentless toil, where every waking hour was consumed by private lessons, budget spreadsheets, and the crushing weight of her family's debts.
During those dark, grueling years of constant struggle, her interactions with her master were mediated purely by magical communication devices that distorted his voice. Because he had always thoroughly concealed his physical appearance behind layers of illusion and masks, she had never once viewed him through a romantic lens. Having met him when she was still a mere child, she had never imagined that their professional relationship could ever evoke such unfamiliar racing emotions. Yet now, feeling the warmth of his chest radiating through his clothes, her heart beats wildly against her ribs, leaving her completely flustered. She mentally struggles to regain her composure, highly aware of the hard, solid muscles pressing against her in the cramped space. Hearing his quiet, rhythmic breathing right against her ear, she desperately tries to convince herself that it is all just her overactive imagination. When he softly whispers to ask if she has a clear view, a bright blush explodes across Judith's face, prompting her to nervously suggest that he step back and rest. The master is thoroughly bewildered, pointing out that sending him away makes absolutely no sense in their current situation. Insisting on staying to watch over the young boy, he quickly deduces that she is simply trying to deflect her own growing discomfort onto him. He counters by admitting that he is equally uncomfortable, completely ignoring Judith's protests about her having a much smaller, less intrusive physical frame. Judith plays along by squirming to demonstrate how much room she occupies, earning a stern, hushed warning from the master to stop moving immediately. She internally grumbles about his massive, unyielding build that leaves absolutely no room for negotiation or physical movement. With a sudden, intense shift in his gaze, he warns her that they are practically embracing already, and any further movement would be highly dangerous. Flustered beyond belief, Judith buries her face in her hands, desperately pleading with him to shift just a fraction of an inch away. Adjusting his mask with a heavy sigh, the master reminds her of his previous warning that she is far too distracting to work with. He quietly admits that being around her completely dissolves his professional composure, making him feel childishly vulnerable. Forcing himself to focus, he gently steadies her shoulders, urging them both to concentrate on their mission to protect young Carl. Stealing her resolve, Judith presses her eye back to the narrow gap, pushing her racing thoughts aside to focus on the task at hand. Through reading, she catches sight of a fragile young boy sitting quietly on the floor with a massive teddy bear looking completely adorable. She feels a deep pang of sorrow, struggling to believe that this innocent, angelic child is destined to become the novel's ultimate tragic villain. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoes against the heavy bedroom door as an ominous voice outside announces the arrival of Sarah, the abusive maid. Peering through the narrow wooden gap, Judith's eyes widen as she finally catches sight of her target. In the center of the lavish bedroom, the abusive maid, Sarah, looms over young Carl, confronting him about his reading habits. To the rest of the world, Sarah carries herself with the poise of an angel, convinced she is entirely superior to the other servants. For years, she harbored a dark, obsessive ambition, watching Ekian Minas from the shadows and dreaming of standing by his side. Though Ekian offered her books and quills out of mild kindness, she was clever enough to realize it was never romantic, carefully guarding her boundaries. She knew instinctively that letting her attachment show would only result in being cast aside from the grand estate. Realizing Ekian was out of reach, Sarah shifted her toxic ambitions toward the next best target, young Carl. She showered the little boy with manufactured affection, plotting to use his attachment to secure her place near Ekian. By demonstrating her high intelligence and answering the boy's difficult questions, she seamlessly integrated herself into their daily lives. But her carefully calculated fantasy completely shattered the moment Ekian suddenly vanished. With her grand dreams of escaping her lowly status and marrying into nobility ruined, a bitter, twisted despair consumed her. Left with nothing but shattered hopes, Sarah's desperation quickly curdled into pure, unadulterated malice. Looking down at the innocent young boy, she decided to turn her boiling resentment directly against the Medius duchy. Consumed by vengeful rage, she resolved to completely ruin the grand household by weaponizing her influence over Carl. Behind the wooden panels, the master quietly praises Sarah's supposedly upright reputation, completely unaware of her sinister nature. Judith looks at him with a mixture of shock and pity, realizing the Information Guild has been completely deceived by the maid's flawless act. Back in the room, Sarah gently strokes Carl's hair, her soft voice carrying a chilling, manipulative edge as she questions his comfort. She poisonously suggests that his mother will despise him, assuming he is happy to become the heir now that his brother is gone. Terrified by the cruel accusation, young Carl drops his stuffed bear, tearfully screaming that he only wants his brother to return. Feigning sympathy, Sarah holds him close, insidiously planting doubts about his mother's true feelings toward him. She delivers a devastating psychological blow, warning the boy that his brother might never return if he sees Carl thriving without him. Sobbing hysterically, Carl desperately explains that he is only reading because his brother asked him to complete the books before turning 10. She coldly dismisses his innocent hopes, reminding him that the comforting reality of the past is gone forever. Seizing control of his fragile mind, she asks about his weight, insidiously suggesting he must stop eating to prove his grief. The fragile boy weakly protests, explaining that he cannot skip meals without deeply upsetting his watchful mother.
With practiced cruelty, Sarah distorts his love for his family, claiming that his healthy growth will only cause his loved ones pain. Squeezing his small hands, she whispers a horrifying proposal, offering to help him throw up his meals in the garden. She frames this dangerous, abusive cycle as a noble sacrifice that will surely catch his brother's attention and bring him home. Blinded by manipulation, the innocent child beams with tragic gratitude, embracing his abuser and thanking her for her help. Looking at her with absolute, unwavering trust, Carl vows to follow her twisted guidance, entirely unaware of the poison she is feeding him. Inside the dark wardrobe, Judith's blood runs cold as she trembles with a volatile mixture of horror and mounting fury. Unable to bear the sickening display a second longer, the master's unshakable composure shatters as he prepares to intervene. As he moves to confront the maid, Judith desperately holds him back, reminding him that Carl will only protect his abuser if they act rashly. Pressing close to him, she pleads with him to let her handle the situation, promising to save the boy through a calculated plan. But their hushed whispers catch the sharp, attentive ears of the suspicious maid outside. Halting in her tracks, Sarah slowly turns toward the wardrobe, calling out to ask if Carl has invited an intruder inside. Judith's heart hammers violently against her ribs as she watches the maid's shadow stretch toward their hiding spot. Squeezing deeper into the shadows, the two hold their breath as the wardrobe doors begin to creak open. With a sudden, swift motion, Sarah throws the doors wide open, casting a cold, sweeping gaze into the dark closet. She rustles through the hanging garments, searching frantically for any sign of a hidden intruder. Finding nothing but empty clothes, she lets out a quiet sigh, leaving Carl confused by her sudden, bizarre behavior. Attributing the strange noises to a simple water leak, she dismisses her suspicion and closes the wardrobe, completely missing the hidden intruders. Safe within the dim passage once more, the master leans against the wall, letting out a long, heavy breath of relief. Still wrapped tightly in his protective embrace, Judith feels her cheeks flush, suddenly overwhelmed by the intense, lingering proximity. She internally panics, struggling to reconcile her gratitude with the wildly racing beat of her heart. Stepping back slightly, the master softly apologizes for losing his temper, deeply disturbed by the maid's horrifying double life. Judith notes with grim determination that Sarah's act was so flawless that even the Duke and Duchess were completely blinded by her devotion. Looking at her intently, he asks if her quick thinking means she already has a clever plan to expose the maid's abuse. Staring up at him, Judith is momentarily stunned, catching a rare glimpse of the intense, raw emotion behind his masked facade. With a gentle, teasing smile, she points out that she has never heard him talk so much, realizing the legendary guildmaster possesses a deeply caring heart. Feeling her soft laughter vibrating against him, his composure breaks as he mutters a strained plea for her to stop. When she asks why, he admits with mounting irritation that every soft breath she takes brushes directly against his sensitive neck. Leaning in close, he whispers that her sheer innocence proves she knows next to nothing about the nature of men. Shifting back to give her some space, he quietly notes that they have achieved their main goal of uncovering the truth. When Judith asks who will ultimately save the young boy, she smiles softly, already knowing the only true answer. She gently explains that only a child's parents possess the real power to rescue them from such insidious abuse. The very next morning, an unexpected letter arrives at the estate, bearing the official seal of the Duchess of Meius. Reading Isabella's warm invitation to lunch and tea, Judith realizes this is the perfect opportunity to set her plan in motion. Smiling at the messenger, Judith politely asks him to wait while she goes inside to draft a formal reply. As she opens the door to her boarding room, she wonders aloud if she should accept the Duchess's midday invitation. To her complete shock, she finds the guildmaster already sitting comfortably inside, casually confirming her thoughts. Surprised by his sudden presence, she asks if he is leaving, but he calmly insists that she should go ahead of him. Judith looks at him in disbelief, playfully questioning if the legendary guildmaster truly has nothing better to do than loiter in her room. He dryly counters that while he is indeed busy, his sheer curiosity about her secret plan kept him from leaving. With a sudden softness in his eyes, he confesses that he has a younger brother around Carl's age, making this mission deeply personal. Stunned by the unexpected revelation, Judith jokingly admits she always pictured him as a ruthless, solitary man devoid of family. Changing the subject, she inquires if there are any hidden passages leading directly into the mansion's rear garden. Hearing this, his mind immediately conjures a dark, violent solution, thinking it would be far easier to simply assassinate the wicked maid. He insists on executing the deadly task entirely alone, wanting to spare Judith from the grim burden of bloodshed. Setting his teacup down with a quiet clink, he gently urges her not to view his ruthless methods as overly harsh. He coldly reasons that if they do not eliminate the maid immediately, Carl's life will remain in grave danger. Slamming her hands onto the desk, Judith fiercely objects, declaring that mindless violence will solve absolutely nothing. She passionately argues that what Carl truly needs is the conscious realization that his trusted abuser was entirely wrong. She asks him to consider the psychological damage if Sarah were to suddenly die before the young boy discovered her malicious deception. The master falls into a heavy, reflective silence, realizing the profound depth of her emotional insight.
Judith warns that Carl would merely preserve the maid's memory as a saintly figure who was tragically lost. He would carry her poisonous, manipulative words as a sacred burden, remaining spiritually shackled to his abuser for the rest of his life. Pinching the bridge of his nose with a weary sigh, the master concedes that his anger clouded his judgment.
Judith smiles warmly, assuring him that getting deeply upset over a child's suffering only proves his profound humanity.
She silently reflects on how their shared vulnerability in the secret passage has finally shattered the cold distance between them. The memory of his protective embrace makes her heart swell, realizing he is far more than just a masked enigma. Looking at her with newfound respect, the master completely yields, promising to support whatever plan she chooses to execute. Judith blushes, momentarily taken aback by his sudden, uncharacteristic declaration of absolute trust. He quietly explains that while he once operated entirely alone, he is now fully prepared to stand back and trust her guidance. Teasing him with a bright smile, she asks if he would have recklessly intervened had she not been there to hold him back. The master turns his head away, a subtle blush creeping up his neck as he silently processes his own intense feelings. Trying to regain his composure, he dryly points out that after 3 years of partnership, such mutual trust is long overdue. Holding her sealed letter high, Judith confidently reassures him that by this afternoon, the maid's cruel reign of terror will finally end. Meanwhile, at the Grand Meius estate, the Duchess receives Judith's polite reply declining the lunch invitation but eagerly accepting afternoon tea. Isabella sighs softly during her solitary lunch, worrying that Judith's refusal was merely a polite gesture to avoid her company. Her heart yearns to welcome the brilliant young woman, believing she possesses the perfect elegance to one day lead the duchy. But her grand aspirations quickly dissolve into sorrow, knowing such a future is entirely dependent on her missing eldest son, Ekian. Noticing her mother's sudden distress, young Carl looks up from his plate, gently asking if something is wrong. Forcing a bright smile, the Duchess reassures him that she was simply worried he wasn't eating enough to support his growth. Smiling eagerly, the innocent boy stuffs his mouth with food, determined to prove he is healthy and strong. Watching him, Isabella feels a profound wave of gratitude for Sarah, believing the maid's presence has successfully healed Carl's broken spirit. Gently rising from the table, the Duchess instructs Carl to finish his dessert before heading upstairs to rest. Outside in the manicured gardens, the vibrant red roses bloom in spectacular abundance, bathing the estate in a sweet, heavy fragrance. Walking through the lush pathways, Isabella decides this picturesque setting is the absolute perfect spot to host their afternoon tea. But her peaceful preparation is violently shattered by a servant's terrified scream echoing across the garden. Swirling around in pure shock, the Duchess's breath catches as she spots Baron Judith charging urgently into the garden. Judith screams a frantic warning that the young master is in grave danger, desperately rallying the guards to follow. Completely oblivious to the looming threat, young Carl wanders peacefully along a sun-drenched garden path. Spying a familiar figure in the distance, the innocent boy beams with joy and runs eagerly toward his trusted maid. Greeted with a practiced, sweet smile, Carl admits he left the table early, entirely unaware of the malice hiding behind her warm eyes. A dark, calculated smirk slips onto Sarah's face as she realizes the family's distraction gives her the perfect, unmonitored window to strike. Sitting on the garden swing, Carl proudly explains that he did exactly as she asked, turning away his tutor and skipping his training. Feigning gentle gratitude, Sarah warmly praises his compliance, further cementing her destructive influence over the young heir. Within the shadows of her mind, she sneers in triumph, mocking how easily the brilliant young genius yields to her every whim. Yet her victory remains hollow, haunted by the lingering memory of Ekianth, the one man she truly desired. Her warped obsession flares into bitter delusion, convinced that she alone was ever qualified to rule by his side. Clutching a hidden vial behind her back, she harbors deep resentment toward the eldest son who dared to leave her behind in servitude. A chilling, unhinged smile spreads across her face as she rationalizes her cruelty, blaming Ekian for the ruin she is about to unleash. Turning back to the boy, she presents the toxic liquid, falsely framing the poison as a helpful medicine to purge his meals. She lies that she risked sneaking into the city last night just to acquire it, prompting the tragic child to thank his abuser with absolute devotion. Holding the dark vial, Carl looks up with heartbreaking hope, asking if wasting away will truly make his beloved brother return. Sarah feeds his desperation, falsely promising that his deteriorating health is the only trigger powerful enough to force Ekian home. She delivers the final, cruel, psychological blow, warning him that if he remains a strong and healthy heir, his brother will never return. Tears of despair stream down Carl's face as he completely breaks down, fully convinced that his own strength is his brother's exile. In his fragile, manipulated mind, a tragic and dangerous resolve takes root. He must ensure he never gets well. Towering over him like a monstrous shadow, the maid places the heavy burden of the family's broken happiness entirely on his tiny shoulders.
Watching from the dense foliage, the master digs his gloved hand into a branch, his fiery rage testing the limits of his composure. Glaring at the wicked woman, he silently brands her a venomous snake, desperately waiting for Judith to launch her trap. Pressing her cruel advantage, Sarah coaxes the child to drink the liquid quickly, promising to bring it after every meal. Trembling with anxiety, the innocent boy prepares to swallow the poison, desperate to protect his tragic secret from his parents. But just as the bottle touches his lips, a powerful, desperate hand lunges forward and violently slaps the thread away. With a sharp, resounding crash, the glass vial shatters against the stone path, spilling its toxic contents harmlessly onto the ground. Sarah's smug satisfaction instantly evaporates into sheer terror as a furious iron grip wrenches her back by the collar. Driven by the raw, protective fury of a mother, the Duchess looms over her with blinding, unbridled rage. A violent crack echoes through the garden as Isabella delivers a brutal, unforgiving slap across the maid's deceitful face. Stripped of her elegant facade, the wicked woman collapses onto the hard dirt in absolute shock and disgrace. Towering over the traitor like an avenging fury, Isabella unleashes a suffocating aura, fiercely condemning the ungrateful wretch who targeted her son. In that exact moment, Judith and a wall of stern estate guards arrive, instantly cornering the fallen maid. Thrashing violently in their grasp, Sarah shrieks in denial, her desperate screams echoing as she tries to resist her arrest. Stepping forward with icy calm, Judith gazes down in disgust, reminding the vile maid that her high intelligence only makes her cruelty pathetic. The desperate maid attempts to scream for the young master, but her cries are instantly smothered as the guards drag her away. Watching the snake being carted off in disgrace, Judith's eyes flash with grim focus, knowing the psychological healing is just beginning. Terrified and confused by the sudden violence, young Carl desperately pulls at his mother's dress, pleading for his beloved maid. Gripping his shoulders, Isabella desperately demands how he could starve himself and skip his training at a servant's command. Pulling him close with tears of pure agony, the Duchess weeps, asking if he truly thinks his brother would want to see him broken. Walled in by his mother's explosive grief, the young genius is frozen in shock, having never seen her look so utterly devastated. Sobbing helplessly, the boy shrinks back in overwhelming guilt, wondering if his desperate desire to see his brother was a crime. Sensing the critical moment, Judith steps in, gently advising the Duchess to redirect her anger toward the true manipulator. Blinded by frustration, Isabella argues that Carl is a certified genius who should have known better than to believe such obvious lies. Looking at her with soft, unshakable empathy, Judith gently reminds the weeping mother that Carl is still only an 8-year-old child. She explains that academic brilliance cannot replace real-world maturity, making it natural for a lonely boy to crave guidance, even from a monster. Kneeling down, Judith wraps the weeping boy in a warm, comforting embrace, finally lifting the crushing weight of adult expectations from his chest. Feeling the protective warmth of a genuine protector, Carl's tears flow freely, his wounded spirit finally finding a safe harbor. Offering him a warm, radiant smile, Judith gently introduces herself, validating his feelings with profound kindness and respect. Wiping away his tears, the adorable boy shyly bows and introduces himself, the shadows finally lifting as the truth begins to set him free. Kneeling before the young boy, Judith gently explains that Sarah's words were nothing but a wicked lie and that his beloved brother Ekian would never want to see him suffer. She tenderly reminds him that by leaving the estate, Ekian was actually entrusting the safety of their parents to Carl, asking how his brother would feel seeing them so deeply hurt. Overwhelmed by the sudden realization, Carl's tiny fist trembles as he struggles to find his words. In a desperate, tearful plea, Carl protests that Sarah had been closer to his brother than anyone else since childhood, his heart clenching in painful confusion. Unable to contain her anger any longer, Isabella snaps in frustration, shouting that if Ekian had truly cherished that wretched maid, he would never have vanished without a single word of farewell. Tears streaming down his face, Carl demands to know what makes Judith any different from the maid who betrayed him, sobbing as he asks how he can possibly trust her. Isabella breaks the tense silence with a thunderous revelation, declaring that Judith is entirely different because she is carrying Ekian's unborn child. The jaw-dropping announcement sends an immediate shockwave through the garden, leaving Carl, Judith, and even the hidden master frozen in complete, utter disbelief. Unaware of the internal chaos she has just caused, the Duchess proudly doubles down, claiming Judith was Ekian's passionate lover and is now carrying the family's future heir. Shocked into immediate concern, the young genius frantically urges Judith to stand up, recalling from his extensive reading that squatting is dangerous for expectant mothers. Flustered and completely bewildered by the boy's sudden medical advice, Judith can only offer a sheepish, sweating thank you. Looking up with renewed hope, the young boy eagerly asks if she truly loved his brother, begging to know, "I'm just a language model and can't help with that." Lowering her gaze with a soft, mournful sigh, Judith weaves a tragic tale, whispering that Ekian had left her behind just as he did his family. Hearing this, Carl's heart aches with deep sympathy for the young woman, imagining the silent sorrow she must be carrying all on her own.
Behind the boy's back, Judith and Isabella share a silent, victorious glance, pleased to see their elaborate ruse working so flawlessly. But the young boy's sympathy quickly curdles into a sudden dark aura of intense familial fury. Stomping his feet in sheer outrage, the little genius furiously brands his older brother a spineless deadbeat who abandoned his pregnant lover, claiming they would be better off forgetting he ever existed. Listening from his hiding spot, the master breaks into a cold sweat, forced to silently endure his own little brother thoroughly destroying his character. Grimacing in pure awkwardness, he nervously wonders if he should just reveal himself to stop the relentless onslaught of insults. Later that evening, in the warmth of his private quarters, Carl sips his tea as he quietly reflects on how genuinely kind and comforting Judith has been to him. Looking over at her as she quietly flips through a book, the young boy marvels at how safe and at ease he feels in her presence. Eagerly leaning forward, Carl asks when she will finally move into the manor, and Judith warmly replies that it will happen once her marriage to the Duke is officially registered. Blushing slightly, Carl shyly asks if he may call her his sister-in-law, prompting a bright, affectionate smile from Judith as she happily consents. Holding his head in dramatic exasperation, the young boy vows to give his older brother a thorough scolding the moment he dares to show his face, leaving Judith to chuckle nervously. Gripping his teacup with newfound resolve, Carl reflects on the heavy responsibility his brother left behind. With a mature look in his eyes, he silently promises that even if his brother never returns, he will make sure she is never left alone. Gazing at her with fierce, adorable determination, the young heir solemnly vows to protect his future sister-in-law and her child until his very last breath. As the exhausted boy finally drifts off to sleep, Judith looks down at his peaceful face, tenderly reflecting on how he is still just an innocent child beneath his mature facade. Her peaceful thoughts are abruptly shattered by a quiet, rhythmic thumping sound echoing from the depths of her wardrobe. Rolling her eyes in mild amusement, Judith approaches the large cabinet, instantly knowing exactly who is hiding inside. Sliding the doors open, she dryly asks if he has literally nothing better to do than follow her around like a shadow all day. Peeking out with a serious expression, the master explains he was only staying close in case she needed a rescue, before urgently pulling her into the cramped wardrobe with him. Clung tightly together in the small space, the master leans in close, his voice hushed as he eagerly asks how she managed to coordinate everything so perfectly. Judith quietly explains her calculated plan, revealing that she deliberately arranged the garden tea to perfectly coincide with the exact time Sarah always met the young master. By precisely tracking both the Duchess and the maid, she only needed to deliver a frantic warning to the mother, knowing her maternal instincts would do the rest. Smiling mischievously, Judith admits she was pleasantly surprised by the Duchess's explosive temper, finding the brutal slap of justice incredibly satisfying to witness. Gazing deeply into her eyes, the master expresses his relief that the young boy wasn't too badly hurt, prompting Judith to playfully tease him for staring so intensely. He silently recalls how she had gently told Ka that growing up step by step is a sacred privilege of childhood, his heart swelling with profound admiration for her. Her gentle, radiant smile flickers in his mind, completely cementing his belief that beneath her sharp intellect lies an incredibly kind and beautiful soul. Softening completely, a warm, genuine smile spreads across the master's face, his usual cold demeanor entirely melting away in her presence. Feeling the sudden, intense shift in the atmosphere, Judith gazes up at him, a playful glint lighting up her eyes. Leaning in with a mischievous grin, she boldly asks if he has finally gone and fallen in love with her, leaving him completely flustered. Surrounded by imaginary roses, she continues to tease him mercilessly, asking if her brilliant mind and warm heart have finally conquered his guarded soul. Chuckling softly, she reminds him that his timing is rather tragic, considering she's on the fast track to becoming a married woman. The master's playful mood immediately vanishes, replaced by a look of sheer, unmasked shock at her words. Flashing him a radiant, teasing grin, she jokes that if he plays his cards right, she might just consider him as a candidate for her second marriage. Totally exasperated, the sweating master dryly points out the sheer absurdity of planning a second marriage before her first has even been made public. Huffing proudly, Judith argues that after a lifetime of relentless suffering, she absolutely deserves a massive payout to clear her debts and live in luxury. Stepping back, the master desperately questions her supposed affection for Ekian, only for Judith to pragmatically point out that it's time to move on from a man missing for 5 years. She dramatically shudders, wondering aloud if the missing heir has suffered so brutally in exile that he has completely lost his legendary handsome features. Enraged by her cold pragmatism, the master asks if she would truly discard Ekian just for losing his handsome features, only to Judith to dryly mock him in return. Swallowing his frustration, the master softly advises Judith that she is still young and financially secure enough to never rush into another marriage. A shadow of quiet melancholy crosses Judith's face as she softly muses that his advice would only apply to someone who actually had a family.
She reflects on the painful reality of her upbringing, explaining that the broken family she grew up with was never a life she chose for herself. Looking back on the young master's tears, she confesses her quiet envy of his painful, explosive reality, remembering how her own parents never cared enough to even worry about her. With a bittersweet smile, she shrugs off her tragic past, choosing instead to trust in her own resilience and face the future with unshakable optimism. Turning back to the master with a bright grin, she playfully offers him a chance to win her hand, regardless of his status, as long as he works hard. Giggling softly, she delivers one final playful warning, teasing that she still can't promise she will like whatever face is hidden beneath his mask. In the quiet of his chamber, Carl shifts fitfully in his sleep, his peaceful face momentarily clouded by the lingering remnants of a nightmare. Bidding him a casual farewell, Judith turns to leave, telling her masked protector he is welcome to slip away whenever he pleases. Touched by her carefree warmth, a genuine, breathless smile spreads across the master's face as he watches her go. The very next morning, an official invitation arrives from Duke Meius himself, while the master comfortably lounges in her room before casually seeing her off. He insists that as the leader of the prestigious Grey Information Guild, he must stay privy to any secret dealings happening within the Duke's walls. Riding in her carriage, Judith wonders if his sudden diligence is because she mentioned liking hardworking men, trusting he has the common sense to keep his distance. The carriage rolls steadily onward, drawing her closer to the Grand Ducal estate where her destiny awaits. Peering out the window, a sly smile dances on her lips as she thinks that if the master's face is handsome, she might actually consider him. As her arrival is announced at the estate, Judith braces herself, knowing today represents the final crucial hurdle in her high-stakes plan. She steps forward with absolute elegance, ready to fully cement her role in this grand deceptive contract. But her calculated entry is instantly interrupted by a cheerful, high-pitched voice eagerly calling out to her. Turning around, Judith is greeted by the young master running toward her, accompanied by the Duchess, who watches them with a softened expression. Though Duchess Isabella proudly claims she only came to express her gratitude, Carl enthusiastically breaks the tension, shouting that he ran out purely to see his sister-in-law. Clearing her throat, the Duchess suddenly comments on the beautifully blooming roses, catching Judith completely off guard. Seeing Judith's confusion, the blushing Duchess quickly averts her gaze, muttering that she was simply talking to herself. Realizing the Duchess remembered their conversation from yesterday, Judith smiles inwardly, finding her clumsy tsundere attempt at showing affection incredibly endearing. When teased about her sudden fondness for Judith, the Duchess flusters, insisting she only finds the young woman mildly tolerable. Guided into the grand reception hall, Judith's breath catches as she finally lays eyes on the powerful figure waiting for her. Seated upon his throne-like chair is Duke Meius, the formidable head of the household, exuding an aura of absolute authority. Locking his piercing blue eyes onto her, the powerful patriarch formally welcomes her to his domain. Standing face to face with the legendary Iron Duke, Judith feels the sheer weight of his presence. He reasserts his absolute authority, introducing himself as the reigning head of the great House Meius. His voice is steady and resonant as he greets her, cementing his legendary reputation with every word. Observing his razor-sharp gaze, Judith notes with a chill that the Duke truly looks as if he were forged from iron itself. Beckoning her forward, the Duke bids her to sit, prompting young Carl to politely take his leave after bidding a sweet farewell to Judith. Pausing at the door, the adorable boy pumps his fist to cheer her on, leaving Judith completely charmed by his supportive warmth. Once they are alone, the Duke gets straight to business, introducing the elite primary physicians brought in to oversee their crucial medical evaluation. As the lead physician introduces himself as Bart Callan, Judith's heart drops instantly at the mention of his name. Alarm bells ring in her head as she recalls from the novel that this man is actually a dangerous spy loyal to the Emperor. With the House of Meius possessing wealth and power that directly rivaled the imperial family, they have always been a constant threat to the Emperor's throne. To keep the powerful duchy in check, the calculating Emperor had deliberately planted his own agents deep within their ranks. Bart Callan is a ruthless, loyal puppet whose ultimate mission is to bring about the complete ruin of the Meius family. Cold sweat pools on Judith's neck as she remembers the terrifying truth. This very physician is the one destined to assassinate the Duke and Duchess in a year's time. Forcing herself to remain calm, Judith gives a polite nod, hiding her internal panic behind a perfectly crafted mask of composure. A second, younger physician named Hayud Ramis steps forward next, introducing himself with a gentle and unassuming demeanor. The Duke proudly explains that the brilliant young talent was recruited directly from the academy to manage the health of both himself and young Carl. Judith quickly deduces that the young physician has no ties to the traitor, but she resolves to remain on high alert nonetheless. The Duke questions if she understands the necessity of their presence, and she quietly confirms, ready for the next phase. He explains the sacred bloodline trait, revealing that direct descendants emit a unique energy in the womb that only the Duke can perceive. By forging a pregnancy certificate and securing the Duke's signature, they can successfully convince the world that Ekian is still alive and active. Though the traitor physician is a dangerous wild card, Judith reasons he won't report to the emperor prematurely, matching the timeline of the original story. As the official documents are presented, the Duke sighs heavily, begging the physicians to forgive this necessary deception for the sake of protecting his family. With their temporary arrangement acknowledged, the elite physicians politely take their leave, stepping out of the tense meeting. Turning his sharp gaze toward her, the Duke declares that the official marriage registration will be finalized shortly, meaning she must reside at the estate from this day forward. Judith quietly nods, offering a serene, elegant response that betrays none of her inner calculation. The Duchess chimes in, reminding Judith that they are to be family for the next few months, to which Judith playfully tells her not to be so cold. Shifting her critical gaze over Judith's appearance, the Duchess bluntly remarks that her current wardrobe is completely out of fashion. She sternly adds that even if this is merely a temporary role, Judith must carry herself with absolute responsibility as a member of their household. When Judith brightly promises to do her absolute best, the Duchess suddenly stands up and demands they leave immediately, leaving Judith completely bewildered. Stepping forward with an air of absolute extravagance, the Duchess dramatically announces that they must begin their day with an extensive shopping trip. The heavy curtains of the luxury boutique are swept aside with a grand flourish, signaling the start of an overwhelming fashion showcase. Judith first emerges in a breathtaking white gown designed to embody the pure grace of a majestic swan, prompting the Duchess to instantly purchase it. Next, she tries on a striking, dark ensemble appropriately named the Black Swan, which the Duchess immediately orders to be added to the growing pile. Striking a poised pose in an exquisite crimson gown representing the height of modern trend, Judith easily secures yet another effortless approval. As the tireless fashion show continues, the designer politely informs the tea-sipping Duchess that there is only one final gown left to show. Noting Judith's slight fatigue, the Duchess softly encourages her to try on just one more, telling her to speak up if it becomes too exhausting. Judith offers a gentle smile, assuring her that she is doing perfectly fine, though she harbors a secret concern about the sheer scale of the shopping. Looking around the massive salon overflowing with luxurious garments, Judith timidly wonders if the Duchess hasn't perhaps gone a little overboard. Blushing slightly, the Duchess defensively mutters that as someone who never had a daughter, this is merely her first time experiencing such a place. Quickly regaining her composure, she orders Judith to hurry and try on the last dress, prompting a soft nod of agreement. Watching the interaction from the side, the elegant boutique designer smiles warmly, deeply proud of her creations and the bond unfolding before her. Driven by professional curiosity, the designer boldly leans in to ask about the exact relationship between the noble matriarch and the young woman. With absolute pride and without a shred of hesitation, the Duchess proudly declares that Judith is to be her daughter-in-law, leaving the designer completely stunned. Back at the changing room, the maid respectfully announces that the final outfit is ready, asking if she should draw the curtains. Eager to witness the final transformation, the Duchess commands her to reveal the look immediately. Judith steps out in a stunning ruffled pink gown, shyly asking if the dress truly suits her since the Duchess's face seems so troubled. Mesmerized by her radiant beauty, the Duchess quickly recovers, ordering the servants to wrap it up and discard the plain clothes Judith arrived in. Judith smiles warmly to herself, realizing that beneath the Duchess's sharp, demanding words lies a genuinely affectionate heart. However, looking at the monumental mountain of expensive boxes, Judith can't help but sweat at the thought of ever wearing them all. The relentless shopping spree carries on for hours, and by the time they finally journey back to the estate, the sun has already dipped below the horizon. Leading the way through the grand corridors, the Duchess formally presents Judith with her new, lavish living quarters. Judith's eyes widen as she is told this is Ekian's personal bedroom, which she must share as his official wife. Later that evening, a polite knock echoes at the door as young Carl sweetly asks if he may enter his sister-in-law's chambers. The adorable boy bursts in alongside the gentle physician, Hugh Ramus, both of them instantly stopping in their tracks as they lay eyes on Judith. Staring in absolute awe at her dazzling pink gown, Carl innocently wonders aloud if his older brother always had such a preference for stunningly beautiful people. Flustered by her presence, Hayud nervously scratches his head, softly agreeing that Judith is indeed incredibly breathtaking. Judith is thoroughly amused, noting that despite being a dedicated student, the young physician is surprisingly socially adept. After bidding them a warm farewell, Judith promises she will be down shortly as the heavy wooden door clicks shut behind them. Left entirely alone, Judith looks around the massive room, realizing she didn't fully think through the reality of staying in the young Duke's personal quarters. She runs her fingers along the dusty yet immaculately kept bookshelves, noting that the entire room remains perfectly maintained. A soft look of understanding crosses her face as she realizes the grieving Duke and Duchess have kept this room untouched in desperate anticipation of their son's return. They have preserved everything in perfect order so that whenever Ekin finally returns, absolutely nothing will feel foreign or unfamiliar to him. Suddenly, as she touches a specific book on the shelf, a sharp click echoes through the quiet room, startling her instantly. Gasps escape her lips as a hidden bookshelf begins to slide open, revealing a dark secret passage concealed within the wall. Peering cautiously into the shadows, a familiar, smooth voice calls out to her, assuring her that she can rest easy. The master steps forward from the darkness, completely unmasked as a remarkably handsome young man with piercing red eyes, leaving Judith utterly speechless at his dangerous, breathtaking appearance. Under the cold, starry night sky of 5 years ago, the Duke guides his young son Ekian through the dense, snow-laden forest. Shivering slightly from the freezing mountain air, the young boy looks up and questions why they have traveled to such a remote, dusty cabin. Stooping down inside the rundown cabin, the Duke solemnly reveals a hidden trapdoor, explaining that it leads to a secret passage connected directly to the Meius mansion. With a heavy creaking sound, the heavy wooden floorboards are lifted, exposing a dark stone stairwell descending deep into the earth. Descending into the subterranean corridor, young Ekian marvels in absolute wonder at the existence of such a massive hidden escape route. The Duke warns him to stay close in the vast labyrinthine tunnels, quietly resolving to keep this crucial life-saving secret hidden from young Karl until he is much older. Standing in the ancient subterranean corridor, the Duke reminds young Ekian that the hidden passage is a solemn, heavy burden reserved only for the family's patriarch and heir. He emphasizes that if Meius ever faces a catastrophic crisis, the head of the household must survive at all costs to preserve their bloodline. The young boy's eyes widen in disbelief, struggling to accept the harsh reality of abandoning those he loves just to save himself. Pointing to the family crest, the Duke states that deciding whether to survive alone or fight to protect everyone is the true test of leadership. Deep in thought, young Ekian quietly resolves that he cannot bear to survive alone, yet he refuses to let the legacy of Meius perish. The Duke offers a warm, approving smile, deeply heartened to find that his young son shares his exact convictions. Staring at his father's broad back, young Ekian vows to grow into a strong, honorable protector of their family. Yet, in the present, the grown Ekian bitterly reflects that this vow was made long before he discovered the devastating truth of his heritage. Though he promised never to return, concern for his younger brother Karl's safety has repeatedly drawn him back into the shadows. Resolving that today will be his absolute final visit, he prepares to slide the hidden door open, startling Judith on the other side. Peering through the parting books, the masked young master speaks softly, urging her to remain calm. Amused by her stunned silence, the chibi master directs a bewildered Judith to pull specific books to unlock the secret mechanisms. Following his precise instructions, Judith gasps in awe as the massive hidden bookshelf smoothly glides completely open. Stepping into the grand room, Judith marvels at the endless passage, quietly questioning how easily an outsider has been infiltrating the estate. Snapping her out of her deep thoughts, the young master gently asks what has her so thoroughly distracted. Blushing softly under her breath, she sheepishly admits that his sudden entrance caught her entirely off guard. Suddenly, as Judith gazes at his handsome masked face, a mischievous, brilliant idea flashes through her mind. Twirling elegantly in her stunning new gown, she playfully asks if her dazzling appearance has made him fall head over heels for her. She playfully warns him to control his racing heart, teasingly reminding him that she is officially Judith Meius' wife, at least until their divorce. The heavy weight of her words hangs in the silent air, striking a sudden, unexpected chord deep within his chest. He stands frozen, his mind suddenly spiraling as he contemplates what would truly happen if he revealed himself and returned to the family. He envisions the overwhelming joy of his parents and the absolute thrill of young Karl upon seeing him alive and well. But a shadow of doubt darkens his thoughts, realizing Judith would immediately flee the moment she discovered the truth of their contract. Yet, a faint hope glimmers as he recalls her past feelings for him and her deep, earnest desire to build a family. The sweet, fleeting fantasy of a real wedding abruptly shatters, leaving him completely red-faced and mortified by his own ridiculous thoughts. Desperately clutching his face, he curses his wild imagination, realizing that staying near her is becoming far too dangerous for his heart. Watching his sudden distress with utter confusion, Judith tentatively steps forward to ask if he's feeling all right. Shaking off his embarrassment, he listens intently as Judith suddenly asks if he is familiar with the family's chief physician, Bart Kalan. He explains that Kalan is highly skilled, having served the Meius family loyally for over 15 years. Judith points out the strange discrepancy of Kalan refusing to take on an assistant like young Hugh, but the master offers a logical explanation. Shifting to a deadly serious tone, Judith asks if his vow to repay his life debt to her still stands. Sensing the sudden gravity in her gaze, he listens as she reveals that the stakes are far higher than a sin to life. Cold dread fills the room as Judith delivers a chilling warning. 3 vital members of the Meius household are currently being poisoned. Meanwhile, in another parlor, the Duchess warmly praises Judith's kind, hard-working nature and her exceptional loving care for young Karl. Sipping his tea, the Duke remains silent, though a shadow of guilt flickers in his eyes over disrupting the young girl's future marriage prospects. The Duchess suggests that they must take full responsibility by personally arranging a prestigious remarriage for her once the contract ends. Sensing her husband's growing attachment, she pointedly calls his name, catching him completely off guard as he clears his throat. The Duke defensively argues that they have already showered her with expensive dresses and jewels, which should be more than enough. The Duchess firmly fires back, declaring that material wealth can never truly repay the precious life of their youngest son. She sternly warns him against being overprotective, reminding him of the dangers if Judith tries to exploit the Messi's name. Though he acts stoic, the Duchess internally smirks, knowing her husband will spoil Judith even more once he fully warms up to her. She watches him closely, quietly amused as she waits to see exactly how long he can maintain his stern, unyielding facade. Outside the grand estate, a peaceful breeze rustles the trees as the afternoon sun bathes the Duke's private office in warm light. Sitting alone at his massive desk, the Duke quietly reviews the official documents, lost in deep contemplation. He takes a slow sip of tea, the heavy silence of the room reflecting the immense burden of his family's secret plans. The quiet atmosphere is suddenly broken by a polite, rhythmic knock echoing from the grand wooden doors. Looking up from his papers, the Duke prepares himself as a soft voice requests a brief moment of his time. He calmly grants her entry, maintaining his cold official composure as he sips his freshly brewed tea. The delicate teacup is placed down with a soft click, signaling the start of a critical confrontation. As Judith sits across from him in an elegant gown, the Duke dismisses the servants, ready to discuss their next official steps. The heavy wooden doors click shut, sealing Judith and the Duke inside a room now thick with unspoken tension. Eyeing the steaming beverage, Judith tentatively questions if this is the daily tea prescribed by the chief physician, Bart Cologne. Settling into his seat, the Duke asks what brought her here, prompting her to bring up a troubling concern regarding their marriage registration. The Duke braces himself, quietly worrying that the immense burdens of pregnancy, marriage, and an eventual divorce have overwhelmed her. She carefully points out that her birthday has recently passed, a detail that catches the Duke completely off guard. Judith explains that registering their marriage now would suggest she became pregnant as a minor, heavily compromising the young Duke's honor. She gently warns that such a scandal could deal a devastating blow to the entire reputation of the duchy. The Duke is deeply moved, realizing she is selflessly prioritizing the family's honor over her own immediate financial gain. As the Duke proposes a strategic delay, Judith suddenly raises her hand, urgently asking him to halt. Detecting a faint, unnatural aroma, Judith cautiously requests permission to inspect the tea he is about to consume. Looking at the Duke, she recalls a persistent question that has haunted her ever since she met the couple. According to the original novel, the couple was destined to die within a year, yet they appeared entirely healthy. She suspects that Bart Cologne is slowly, meticulously laying the groundwork to end their lives without raising suspicion. But a deeper mystery remains. How did young Carl manage to survive the original tragedy that claimed his parents? Recalling the Duchess's words about Hayud's daily remedies, she suspects the stomachache medicine unknowingly acted as a vital counteragent. Driven by this theory, she had previously asked the Master to alert her when the Duke was served his tea. Though the Master fiercely defended Bart's 15-year loyalty, Judith had firmly insisted he follow her instructions anyway. Back in the present, she steels herself, knowing a mistake here will destroy her credibility, yet she refuses to remain silent. Sensing her absolute seriousness, the Duke asks if she truly wishes to examine his personal tea. Suppressing his skepticism, he closes his eyes and permits her to proceed with the unusual inspection. Raising the warm cup, Judith inhales deeply, focusing all her senses on identifying the underlying aromatic compounds. Her eyes widen in alarm as she implores him to refrain from drinking and immediately summon young Remus. Confused by her sudden panic, the Duke struggles to understand why she is bypassing his chief physician for an assistant. Spinning a quick cover story, Judith explains she learned to identify various medicinal herbs while working as a visiting tutor. She solemnly warns him that the aroma rising from his teacup bears a striking resemblance to a deadly poison. Though she pretends to forget the exact name, she maintains an unshakable poise as she delivers the terrifying news. Pressured by the Duke's mounting skepticism, she urges him to let Hayud perform a professional, objective analysis. She insists that when it comes to the safety of his life, absolute certainty is the only acceptable option. Observing her fierce, unwavering expression, the Duke realizes she is not making these heavy accusations lightly. Yielding to her intensity, the Duke turns to his butler and quietly commands him to take action. He orders the butler to summon Hugh in absolute secrecy, alongside samples of the tea Isabella and Carl drink daily. Minutes later, a tense silence fills the room as young Hugh arrives to face the three mysterious cups. Relieved that the Duke is safe, Hayud is nevertheless shocked by the gravity of the accusations being made. Hudi explains that smuggling poisons past the estate's tight security is impossible, but Judith suggests they might be harmless herbs mixed together. Hugh hesitates, pointing out that demanding to inspect the prescriptions of his senior, Bart, would be highly disrespectful. The Duke interjects, noting that both he and his wife have actually experienced positive, energizing effects from the tea. He explains that the blend successfully restored Isabella's complexion and vitality after the devastating loss of their eldest son. Unfazed, Judith shifts the focus to young Carl, asking why a healthy tea would cause the child such chronic stomach pain. The Duke defensively suggests that the boy's stomach issues might simply be a mild personal intolerance to the ingredients. Fearing she is losing her grip on the argument, Judith desperately calls for a halt to stop them from dismissing her warning. Suddenly struck by an overlooked detail, Hugh asks for a brief moment to conduct a rapid, specialized test. Squeezing a chemical reagent into the cup, Hayud watches in horror as a dark, toxic smoke violently erupts. A cold wave of vindication washes over Judith as she realizes her complex hypothesis has been proven entirely correct. She understands that Bart meant to slowly eliminate the family, but Carl's sensitive reaction to the poison triggered Hyde's accidental countermedicine. By continuously treating Carl's chronic stomach pains, Hyud had unwittingly neutralized the slow-acting toxin, making the boy the sole survivor.
Trembling in absolute disbelief, the young physician looks up from his tools, a look of pure dread on his face.
Turning to the pale Duke, Hyud weakly confirms that the tea does indeed contain a highly lethal poison.
He explains that the mixed herbs create a deadly chemical reaction known in medical circles as the patient assassin.
This deceptive poison initially boosts vitality and energy only to slowly shut down the organs over a prolonged period. Hyud reveals this toxic interaction is what caused young Carl's chronic stomach issues, as a child's sensitive body immediately rejected it.
Terrified for his family, the Duke's breath catches as he demands to know if his youngest son is in immediate danger. Hyud explains that he had consistently used a rare herb called the desert dandelion, completely unaware it was acting as the poison's exact antidote.
A chilling realization settles over them. Had Carl never shown symptoms, and had Hyud not stumbled upon that precise remedy?
The entire family would have been wiped out within a year, prompting the Duke to desperately ask if he and Isabella are already beyond saving.
Grasping the terrifying scope of the plot, the Duke prepares to ask one final critical question about the physician's true intentions. He asks about the likelihood of a mistake, but Hyud points out that Bart used the exact same recipe despite their completely different body types.
Given Bart's immense medical expertise, Hyud solemnly concludes that the probability of this being an accident is practically non-existent. Conversely, the chance of cold, calculated intent is nearly absolute, prompting the Duke to heavily dismiss them from the study. Stealing his expression, the Duke strictly commands them to maintain absolute silence regarding the horrifying truth they just uncovered. But before she can leave, his voice calls out to Judith, addressing her formally as Baroness Eileen. Judith turns back, her striking green eyes reflecting her readiness for whatever difficult choice lies ahead. Deep within the quiet corridors of the grand estate, a heavy shadow falls over the family's once peaceful sanctuary. The fragile illusion of safety is shattered in an instant, leaving the Duchess frozen in absolute shock as the grim reality sets in.
Entering her chamber, she frantically asks if the doctor confessed, only to be met with her husband's grim, silent nod.
Though Bart refused to speak, his silence was a clear confession, prompting the couple to realize they must expose the mastermind backing him. Clutching her head in disbelief, the Duchess breathes a sigh of relief, knowing they would have met a tragic end without Judith's intervention. The Duke agrees, noting that Judith risked everything to save them despite knowing their contract would eventually make them strangers. A heavy silence fills the lavish parlor as they contemplate the immense debt they now owe to the young girl. Determined to repay her, the Duke declares they must arrange a marriage into a prestigious count's family to secure her future.
Meanwhile, back in her quarters, the master grumbles to himself, having fully anticipated this exact turn of events. Seated across from her in the dimly lit room, he questions how she could have possibly uncovered such a deeply hidden conspiracy.
Judith fabricates a story, explaining she once overheard suspicious rumors about Bart's involvement in a poisoning scheme near the Information Guild. As she laments the betrayal of a loyal servant, the master coldly interjects, expressing deep doubt over the doctor's supposed devotion. He explains that Bart likely planned the perfect assassination from the very beginning, acting as a loyal servant solely to bide his time. By choosing a slow-acting, untraceable poison, the assassin ensured no suspicion would fall upon him when they eventually succumbed. Judith silently agrees, realizing how perfectly the villain's scheme aligned with the tragic events of the original novel. Shifting the heavy mood, she suggests the master return to his quarters to rest, though he stubbornly insists he isn't tired. Seeing through his lingering presence, Judith playfully teases him, asking if he is secretly trying to flirt with her. Flustered by her bold accusation, the master hides his blushing face, awkwardly questioning her definition of late-night visits. Their playful banter is suddenly cut short by a polite, firm knock echoing from the hallway. Startled by the sudden intrusion, Judith wonders who could possibly be seeking her audience at such a late hour. From behind the heavy wooden door, Hyud's polite voice requests a brief moment of her time to discuss an urgent matter.
As Judith prepares to answer, the master instantly tenses up, his protective instincts flaring as he questions if she will let him in.
He highly objects, fiercely pointing out the impropriety of a young woman being alone with another man in her bedchamber. When he passionately insists that Hyud is clearly trying to win her favor, Judith sighs in sheer exasperation at his dramatic jealousy. Annoyed by his childish behavior, she physically shoves him toward the balcony, reminding him that Hyud is only here because of the crisis. The master stubbornly continues to fuss over her appearance, complaining about her attire while Judith explains her dresses were discarded. He mockingly addresses her as Baroness, expressing offense that she is not using her title as the young Duchess. Out of patience, Judith snaps, fiercely demanding that he stop his pathetic fussing and leave through the window immediately. In a fit of dramatic anger, she declares that he is acting exactly like a jealous husband who suspects his wife of having an affair. The balcony door slams shut with a loud bang, leaving the stunned master outside in the cool night air. Clinging to the ledge, he clutches his head in absolute bewilderment, his heart pounding at her devastatingly accurate comparison. Regaining her composure, Judith smooths down her dress and warmly invites the young physician to enter.
Hugh tentatively steps into the elegant room, offering a polite apology for intruding upon her so late in the evening. She warmly asks him to simply call her Judith, explaining that official titles only bring unnecessary discomfort before the marriage is finalized. Declining her offer of refreshments, Hugh politely settles in, admitting he is far too anxious to enjoy tea anyway. Judith gets straight to the point, asking if the chief physician has finally broken his silence and confessed to his crimes. Hugh shakes his head, revealing that Bart remains obstinate before admitting he actually came to speak with her on a personal matter. He looks down in deep shame, blaming his own ignorance for failing to recognize the danger lurking in the family's daily tea. Judith gently reassures him, pointing out how Bart systematically restricted his duties to keep him from discovering the dark secret. Judith sighs sympathetically, acknowledging the immense pressure the young doctor must have faced under his corrupt senior's thumb, though she points out that his brilliant medical talents could have secured him a prestigious position anywhere. Hugh honestly admits that no other estate offered a salary quite as high as the Duke's residence. He looks away in shame, confessing that falsifying her pregnancy certificate went entirely against his medical ethics, but driven by desperation, he took the hush money to support his massive family of 7 younger siblings, leaving Judith completely speechless.
He explains that his family sacrificed everything, even selling their sole asset, their beloved farm, just to pay for his prestigious academy tuition. While he studied, his second oldest sibling bore the heavy burden of providing for the rest of the family.
A gentle, determined smile touches his lips as he declares that it is finally his turn to shoulder the responsibility and repay the deep debt of love he owes them. When Judith gently inquires about his parents, Hugh reveals they passed away when he was merely a child, prompting a soft, apologetic look from the Baroness. Suddenly, a sharp jolt of realization strikes Judith, freezing her in her tracks as her green eyes widen in pure disbelief. Her mind races as she recalls the plot of the original novel, realizing Hugh's tragic background perfectly mirrors that of the male lead's long-lost older brother. The timeline, the circumstances, the age, every detail fits far too perfectly to be a mere coincidence. She stares at the young physician in awe, realizing this humble doctor is actually a high-ranking noble, the true-born eldest son of a powerful marquis. If she plays her cards right, she might be able to orchestrate a grand reunion with his real family. But then, a sudden pang of worry grips her heart as she considers the fate of the 7 siblings he so desperately cherishes. If Hugh is returned to his noble lineage, what will become of the family that sacrificed everything for him? Fearing they might be left behind, she shifts the conversation to his present struggles, gently asking if the sheer weight of supporting so many lives while enduring unfair treatment has become too much to bear. She points out that with his remarkable talents, he has the power to walk away from this heavy burden whenever he pleases. He could easily flee to a distant land to build his own successful life, or use marriage as a convenient excuse to sever his family obligations entirely. Hugh looks up thoughtfully, admitting that such selfish avenues of escape had genuinely never crossed his mind before. Yet, even as he contemplates the freedom of leaving, he softly admits he could never bring himself to do it, prompting Judith to ask why. A warm, nostalgic expression softens his face as he explains that seeing young Carl constantly reminds him of his beloved siblings. Even if he ran away to live a life of comfort, his conscience would drag him right back the moment he saw another child in need. He sighs self-deprecatingly, labeling himself a pathetic hypocrite who uses his family as a mere excuse to chase after high-paying jobs. Smiling warmly, Judith reassures him that his devotion is a beautiful testament to his deep love. She confides that she too is maintaining a fake pregnancy to resolve her late father's crushing debts, proving that his struggles are not pathetic, but deeply admirable. Bathed in a radiant light, her genuine compassion shines through, offering a rare moment of peace and comfort to the weary doctor. Touched by her words, Hugh humbly insists he is far from a perfect brother, though he admits he never expected to find such sincere solace from a high-status lady in a grand mansion. Offering him a fresh start, Judith proposes they become close allies since they share such similar burdens, which Hugh happily and eagerly accepts. Looking at his gentle demeanor, Judith resolves to do everything in her power to guide this kind-hearted young man toward his true destiny. She makes a silent, unwavering vow to reunite Hugh with his biological noble parents, setting a massive twist of fate into motion. Meanwhile, pacing down the dark stone corridors, the master fumes in silent jealousy. He mutters bitterly to himself about the sheer audacity of the young doctor visiting Judith's private chambers in the dead of night. His frustration only mounts as he recalls how easily Judith permitted Hugh to call her by her first name, whereas she had made him wait 3 agonizing years for the exact same privilege. Suddenly, Judith's past words about giving the master a chance flash through his mind, sparking a terrifying revelation. He realizes with a shock that her definition of a perfect partner applies to almost anyone, meaning he is actively competing with the entire world. He stops in his tracks, letting out a self-deprecating laugh as he questions his own absurd schoolboy behavior. Forcing his chaotic thoughts of Judith aside, he steels his resolve for the dangerous task at hand. Slipping back into his cold, calculating persona, the master shifts his focus to the dark secrets festering within the castle walls. His crimson eyes gleam with dangerous intent beneath his mask as he prepares to confront the captured traitor, Bart. In the deep shadows, the master's mind wanders back to a stormy night from his youth when he was still the proud heir of the prestigious house of Meius, the fateful night his entire reality shattered.
Through the heavy downpour of that long-ago evening, a polite, urgent knock had sounded on his chamber door, bringing the chief physician to his quarters. The young, golden-haired heir had warmly invited the trusted doctor inside, completely unaware of the devastating revelation that awaited him. Stepping inside, Bart had quietly closed the door behind him, his expression heavy with a secret that would alter the course of history.
Surprised by the late-night visit, the young heir had asked if something was amiss, only to be met with a tense, chilling silence from the physician.
Bowing his head, Bart had begun by reminding the boy of his family's generational devotion, laying the groundwork for a crushing blow.
With a somber, steady voice, the doctor had declared that his deep respect for the family forced him to speak a truth that could no longer remain hidden.
The world seemed to stop as Bart delivered the devastating revelation, cold-bloodedly informing the boy that he was not the Duke and Duchess's biological child.
Stunned, the young heir had tried to laugh it off as a sick joke, fiercely warning the physician that such insolent lies went far beyond his authority. Unmoved, Bart had challenged the boy to test his daily morning tea, revealing it contained a secret reagent specifically designed to alter and maintain his hair color. Desperate to prove him wrong, the young heir had secretly poured out his daily tea, praying with every fiber of his being that the physician's claims were nothing but treasonous nonsense. But as the days bled into weeks, the proud golden locks that served as the undeniable emblem of the Meius lineage began to fade, revealing deep, pitch-black roots underneath. Staring at his own reflection in absolute horror, the boy was forced to accept the chilling, undeniable truth of his stolen identity. Driven by a mixture of panic and betrayal, the young heir had kicked open the doctor's study doors, demanding answers. Clinging to his last shred of sanity, he had demanded to know his true lineage and the identity of his biological parents. Snapping back to the present, the master's memories dissolve as a cold, mocking voice echoes from the darkness of the dungeons. Through the iron bars of the damp cell, the bloody, beaten figure of Bart looks up, a sinister, broken smirk playing on his lips. The traitor rasps that he knew something was amiss when the dungeon guards began quietly collapsing, but he never expected the young Duke himself to slip into the depths of the prison. With a sickening, blood-stained chuckle, Bart corrects himself, addressing the masked intruder not as the Duke, but by his true, stolen birthright, His Imperial Highness the Prince. Recognizing that his own end is near as the slow poison takes hold, Bart offers to answer his questions, urging the prince to speak quickly before his time runs out. Stepping closer to the bars, the master demands to know why, if Bart's loyalty was always a lie, the physician had warned him to flee the estate all those years ago. Bart laughs mockingly, asking if the prince was foolishly hoping for a comforting lie, reminding him that the true nature of his bloodline is something he can already feel deep within his own soul. Bart's voice drips with a terrible, mocking certainty as he claims the prince has grown to bear an uncanny resemblance to the emperor himself in his youth. Raising his blood-stained hand, Bart rasps a chilling explanation for why he drove the boy away so many years ago. He reveals his twisted motive, explaining that he cast him out because it would inflict the maximum possible torment. A chilling silence fills the air as the heavy weight of his true identity settles over the cursed prince. Meanwhile, back in the quiet safety of Judith's chambers, Hayud reflects on how society misjudges the wealth of medical students. Looking at the lavish refreshments, he admits that he once shared the assumption that only the wealthy could afford such costly tuition. Judith listens intently as Hayud gratefully explains how the Duke's generous wages now secure his younger sibling's education. Gesturing to the fine wine, Hayud cheerfully adds that the household even allows them to enjoy the estate's exquisite food and drinks. He raises his glass in high praise, though he quickly points out that the Duke's poor reputation is merely a smear campaign orchestrated by the royal family. Sipping her wine, Judith quietly agrees, noting that the tension between the imperial house and Meius is common knowledge. Setting his glass down with a soft click, Hayud begins to recall a darker rumor from the past. He reveals that the emperor himself had once mercilessly mocked the Duke and Duchess during their painful years of childlessness. Hayud explains how the emperor secretly intercepted the Duchess's private medical requests, callously exposing her desperate struggle to high society. Appalled by the cruelty of the royal court, Judith laments how anyone could find amusement in a woman's heartbreaking struggle to conceive. As she sips her wine, Judith's mind shifts to Hayud's secret lineage, resolving to find his biological parents before it is too late. She contemplates seeking the master's help, but quickly realizes that doing so under the watchful eyes of the estate is far too risky. Realizing she must act independently, she turns back to the young physician, deciding to test their new alliance immediately. She gently calls out to him, prompting a warm, enthusiastic response from the loyal young doctor. Judith explains her need to discreetly send several letters of greeting, asking if he could arrange a trustworthy messenger on her behalf. Eager to help his new ally, Hayud gladly offers to deliver them himself during his upcoming trip to gather medical ingredients. Though Judith worries about placing such a burden on him, Hayud insists with a bright smile that it is absolutely no trouble. Deeply touched by his unwavering kindness, Judith beams at him, filling his heart with a sudden, overwhelming warmth. Caught completely off guard by her radiant smile, the young doctor's cheeks flush a deep, embarrassed red.
A sudden loud hiccup escapes his lips, breaking the tender silence and catching them both by surprise. Amused, Judith asks if the strong wine has finally caught up to him, prompting a flustered Hugh to politely excuse himself. He stumbles toward the exit, promising to handle the letters first thing in the morning before she bids him a warm farewell. The heavy door clicks shut behind him, leaving Judith alone in the quiet, empty room as the silence returns. Sighing in exhaustion, she takes a step forward, only to feel the dizzying weight of the alcohol hit her all at once. Giving into her fatigue, Judith collapses straight onto the plush, comfortable carpet, letting out a soft sigh of pure relief. Suddenly, a familiar, exasperated voice echoes through the room, cutting through her comfortable daze. She looks up to find the master standing at the doorway, staring down at her with a mix of disbelief and quiet irritation. Folding his arms, he bitterly remarks on her sheer audacity for getting drunk with another man in her own husband's private quarters. Squinting through her hazy vision, Judith senses the strange, unfamiliar tension radiating from him. She realizes she has never seen him look so uncharacteristically vulnerable and frustrated, wondering what could have troubled him. Knowing she cannot hold a proper conversation while splayed on the floor, she desperately tries to push herself up. But her limbs feel completely leaden, refusing to cooperate as her balance betrays her once again. She groans in frustration as she slips backward, her body refusing to obey her commands. She flops right back down, completely defeated by the sheer strength of the Duke's expensive liquor. She mumbles slurred excuses, weakly reassuring him that she will be on her feet any second now. Standing over her, the master can only watch in dry amusement as she gets hopelessly tangled in the thick, heavy bedding. Blushing from embarrassment, Judith weakly apologizes for her unsightly state, explaining how alcohol completely drains her strength. The master scolds her gently, questioning why she would drink so recklessly with a man she barely even knows. Defensively, Judith mutters that she and Hudie are merely colleagues who share the same struggles of earning a living under a difficult employer. A prickle of jealousy strikes the master's heart as he coldly points out that her arrangement with him was merely a transaction, not a partnership. Judith pouts at his harsh words, complaining about how easily he dismisses their bond as a mere business deal. Growing frustrated with her confinement, she struggles against the fabric, begging him to at least free her from the suffocating duvet. Horrified by her threat, the master quickly bends down to unravel her before she ruins the pristine furniture. He sighs in utter disbelief, muttering that he never imagined he would have to rescue his partner from a rogue blanket. As his gloved hands gently brush against her skin to pull the fabric away, a sudden electric stillness falls over them both. Gazing up into his crimson eyes, Judith feels her heart skip a beat, wondering if this strange, breathless sensation is merely the alcohol or something far deeper. Staring up at him, a bizarre, dizzying thought suddenly crosses Judith's alcohol-hazed mind. She realizes how utterly scandalous it looks to be stripped of her blanket on another's bed. An awkward, frozen silence stretches between them as the ridiculousness of the situation fully sinks in. Sinking into the mattress, Judith deeply regrets ever opening her mouth in her drunken state. The master sits back, asking why she would recklessly indulge, warning her never to trust drinking men. Judith defends herself, but the master cynically counters that men with dark intentions are master conversationalists. Overwhelmed by his endless lectures, she dramatically protests that she is a fully grown adult. He remains unimpressed, demanding to know when she even started drinking in the first place. As his nagging intensifies, her throbbing headache only worsens, prompting her to beg for silence. Letting out a heavy, exhausted sigh, the master rubs his temples in utter defeat. Seeking a way to ease the tension, she casually invites him to lie down beside her. The master's face flushes crimson as he panics, desperately wondering if she is projecting her own desires. Judith fiercely denies it, leaving them both trapped in a highly flustered, childish argument. Sensing his deep-seated turmoil, Judith softly notes that his dark mood hasn't gone unnoticed. She explains that sharing trivial, quiet conversations is the perfect cure for a troubled soul. To her surprise, the heavy weight of his burdens finally breaks and he collapses beside her. The soft glow of the chandelier illuminates the quiet room as he calls out her name. He quietly commands her never to drink with Hayud again, sparking her curious confusion. He warns that her carefree nature will lead other men to misunderstand her pure intentions. Judith chuckles, sheepishly realizing she just offered him comfort using the young Duke's own bed. A wave of sudden, playful guilt washes over her for imposing on their host's personal space. She breezily remarks that if the Duke objects, she will simply offer him a half-hearted apology. Her absurd, carefree attitude finally breaks through his icy exterior, coaxing a genuine laugh from him. Judith beams, deeply pleased that she has finally succeeded in making him laugh. She gently points out that even nonsense talk can heal a weary, heavily burdened heart. Lying beside her, he realizes that he had forgotten how to laugh before she entered his life. He confesses that in his moment of deepest despair, his feet had guided him here unconsciously. Softly gazing at her, he acknowledges her quiet, intuitive wisdom in handling his fragile emotions. A rare, brilliant smile graces his handsome face, lighting up the dark shadows of his soul. Yet Judith knows her comfort stems not from wisdom, but from her own painful past experiences. She remembers the lonely, cold days of her childhood, wishing for a comforting presence beside her. Trapped in endless routines, she had yearned for someone, anyone, to share her heavy burdens with.
Hearing Hugh speak so fondly of his massive family had triggered a sudden, profound loneliness. Realizing she had no one to protect or care for, a deep isolation had gripped her. Perhaps it was the wine, but she simply couldn't bring herself to send him away tonight. They talked until she fell asleep, waking later to find him gone but her body warmly tucked in. Greeting the bright morning sun, she lets out a long, lazy stretch as she wakes up. Suddenly, a sudden realization hits her. She had completely forgotten to ask him about Marquis Soden. Brushing her worries aside, she trusts that Hyud is already on his way to deliver her letters. Beneath the bright afternoon sun, the cheerful young physician hums happily as he walks the bustling streets. Clutching the final envelope, Hyud takes pride in successfully completing all of Judith's secret errands. He recalls how fondly Judith's former acquaintances spoke of her, showering him with generous snacks. His heart swells with admiration, firmly convinced of Judith's incredibly pure and gentle nature. Checking the final destination, he prepares to make his very last delivery of the day. Stumbling upon the final address, he is utterly shocked to find himself outside an information guild. He wonders what secrets lie inside, suddenly recalling a burning curiosity of his own. A sweet, hopeful blush dusts his cheeks as he wonders if they sell advice on love. Back in the damp dungeons, Bart's chilling question echoes, piercing the dark secrets of the prince's bloodline. The traitor's twisted, blood-stained grin stretches wide as he prepares to deliver his final crushing blow. He drops the devastating truth, revealing the prince was born of the emperor's forced union with a shamaness. A heavy, gloved fist slams against the desk, reflecting a sudden wave of deep-seated self-disgust. Leaning heavily over his paperwork, the bitter memories of his past threaten to drag him back into the shadows. He knows his quiet, isolated life would have remained completely unchanged had he not met Judith. He fondly recalls her bold, bright entry into his life, realizing he now owes her everything. Her radiant, innocent warmth has slowly begun to dismantle the icy walls surrounding his highly guarded heart. Suddenly, a polite knock breaks his deep reverie, instantly pulling him back to the present. Letting out a heavy sigh, he realizes his thoughts keep drifting back to her against his will. A gentle voice interrupts his solitude, announcing a delivery meant directly for the guild's elusive master. A dark, knowing smirk plays on his lips as he instantly recognizes the young visitor's voice. Setting down a warm cup of tea, the host subtly prepares to face his unexpected guest. He explains that direct audiences in his sanctuary are strictly reserved for an elite circle of prestigious clients. He gladly accepts Judith's letter, warmly noting her exceptionally special and close status within his organization. Hugh beams with genuine pride, happy to see Judith's business handled with such high priority. Behind his polite facade, a quiet, protective irritation begins to brew as he observes the youth. Assessing the handsome, refined young doctor, the master finds his bright and carefree nature deeply bothersome. A silent, tense rivalry intensifies as the master watches his guest's remarkably elegant and relaxed posture. Tormented by sudden insecurity, the master panics, wondering if Judith prefers bright, friendly men over him. Sensing his host's sudden distraction, Hugh hesitantly offers to leave, but the flustered master quickly declines. Reclaiming his cool composure, the master requests his guest wait while he prepares a direct reply. Skimming the parchment, he discovers Judith's urgent request to locate the missing Marquis Soden and his wife. While tracking them is simple, he deeply ponders the mystery behind her sudden interest in them. Breaking the silence, Hugh cautiously seeks confirmation about the true nature of this highly secretive establishment. Taking a leap of faith, the young doctor inquires if he might purchase some personal knowledge. A warm, embarrassed blush creeps onto Hugh's cheeks as he struggles to voice his private request. He describes his new love interest as an incredibly sweet, charming woman who easily captures everyone's heart. As Hugh asks for romantic guidance, the master's grip tightens, snapping his pen in pure, burning jealousy. A sudden, deafening silence fills the grand office, leaving the young physician completely baffled by the tension. Realizing the absurdity of his request, Hugh sheepishly wonders if he has overstepped a boundary. Looking closer, Hugh senses an ominous, unyielding aura radiating from the enigmatic guildmaster before him. Beneath his polished manners, the host possesses a terrifyingly heavy presence that commands absolute authority. The carefully hidden face and magically masked voice scream of a man hiding highly dangerous secrets. Mortified, the young doctor deeply regrets bringing up his trivial love life in such a serious place. To his surprise, the master stands tall, coldly promising to reveal the fate of his pursued. He begins by stating precisely when and where the young physician first met his beloved. Hugh freezes in sheer shock, wondering how this complete stranger could possibly know his private details. Listing his academy credentials and recent associates, the master demonstrates his terrifyingly vast and absolute intelligence network. With eyes flashing red, the master delivers a chilling warning, advising him to abandon his feelings entirely. He coldly insists the woman sees him as a mere colleague, leaving zero chance for romance. Frustrated, Hyu demands to know what kind of man could possibly satisfy her incredibly high standards. The master's sharp, piercing gaze cuts through him, hinting at a truth he already deeply fears. He points out the harsh reality of their circumstances, ruthlessly crushing the young doctor's patient hope. The master doubles down on his cruel verdict, leaving the young physician completely heartbroken and stunned. Though Hugh tries to defend his own charm, the master bitterly agrees, finding his attractiveness incredibly annoying. Resorting to high society rules, the master points out the massive, unyielding class divide between them. He strictly remarks that only a high-ranking nobleman would ever be considered worthy of her hand. Intuitively knowing Judith's humble, pure nature, Haidu softly disputes his cynical and cold aristocratic view. Pressured by the master's relentless social arguments, the young doctor reluctantly yields to the bitter truth. Handing over his written response, the master abruptly ends their consultation to focus solely on Judith's request. When Haidu reaches for his wallet, the master dismissively waves the fee with a cold gesture. He delivers a final parting blow, proudly declaring his own deeply intimate and special relationship with Judith. Setting down a warm tray of freshly brewed herbal tea, Haidu explains its highly potent medicinal properties.
He gently cautions that clearing the deep-seated toxins from Carl's body will take some time, but consistent morning and night doses will guarantee a full recovery.
Relieved beyond measure, the noble patriarch warmly thanks the young physician, expressing his deep gratitude for safeguarding his son's fragile health. Hugh modestly demurs, redirecting all credit to Judith's remarkably sharp instincts and timely intervention. The Duchess agrees wholeheartedly, praising Judith's rare courage to act when others would have remained silent out of suspicion. Hearing his beloved praised fills Hugh with a quiet, secret pride as he politely bows and takes his leave. Yet, as the doors close behind him, the Duchess's soft voice drops a devastating blow regarding Judith's future marriage. Her words echo coldly through the hallway, emphasizing that only a high-ranking noble family is worthy of Judith's hand. The harsh reality of high society stands like an invisible wall, locking him completely out of her world. A bitter smile touches his lips as he questions his own foolish, greedy heart. He reminds himself of his humble commoner status and family burdens, knowing he could never offer her the luxury she deserves. He realizes Judith's sweetness was just her natural warmth, a kindness she generously extends to everyone. A fleeting, desperate wish crosses his mind, the impossible dream of being born into nobility. Shaking his head, he instantly snaps out of his dangerous daydream, mortified by his own sudden jealousy. Clenching his fists, he vows to stay true to himself and make the absolute most of his own life. He finds solace in the thought that they can still remain steadfast friends, supporting one another from afar. A soft knock breaks the quiet afternoon, and a gentle voice grants him entry into her chambers. Hugh enters with a fresh tray, surprising Judith, who wonders why he is visiting so soon after her morning dose. When Hugh reveals the soothing tonic is for Judith, the young master gasps in sudden, frantic worry. The young boy frets over her health, explaining he was only trying to help with prenatal reading to keep her spirits up. Judith reassures him with a warm smile, clarifying that the tea is merely a gentle wellness tonic. The clever young boy instantly jumps to conclusions, loudly wondering if she is suffering from severe morning sickness. Hugh playfully praises the young boy's impressive knowledge, which he proudly boasts of learning from his pregnancy books. The boy clenches his hands in deep concern, relieved to hear that her physical discomfort remains quite mild. Hugh winks playfully, noting that the soothing brew is also highly effective for easing simple hangovers. Judith's heart swells with warmth as she genuinely thanks him for his constant, thoughtful care. Blushing under her radiant gaze, the young physician simply smiles, happy to be of any service to her. Swallowing his lingering feelings, he resolves to push his personal desires aside and simply protect her. With a firm grip, he accepts his role, content to remain her loyal and devoted friend. Under the quiet cover of the night sky, the bustling estate finally settles into a deep, peaceful silence. The next morning, Judith eagerly opens the newly delivered intel regarding the missing Marquis and Marchioness's sudden arrival in the capital. Skimming the unexpectedly polite and respectful tone of the message, she is highly amused and utterly baffled by their change of attitude. Holding the paper over a flickering candle flame, she ponders how to subtly reveal Hugh's identity without sounding incredibly suspicious. She instantly dismisses any direct approach, knowing a crude confrontation would only make them highly defensive. While her prophetic dream excuse worked on the Duchess, strangers would never buy such a convenient lie. Desperately searching her memories, she tries to recall key details from the original novel to aid her plan. Suddenly, a brilliant spark of inspiration hits her as a critical plot point finally flashes in her mind. She remembers that the desperate parents always visited a sacred shrine to pray for their long-lost eldest son's return. This legendary shrine was dedicated to Chaska, a legendary shamaness renowned for her terrifying power of absolute foresight. Having fled her declining homeland, Chaska lived a completely secluded life, keeping her divine visions locked deep within. Yet dark and malicious rumors soon spread, painting the reclusive shamaness as a wicked witch carrying a forbidden child. But divine miracles soon silenced the doubters as unyielding incense and eternal flowers made the shrine seem completely frozen in time. After divine retribution struck down the desecrators, the sacred sanctuary became the ultimate destination for desperate souls seeking miracles, including the Marquis and Marchioness. Realizing this is her golden opportunity, she prepares to construct a masterful plan around this sacred location. Since they never miss a visit when in the capital, she knows exactly where she must stage her intervention. With a mischievous grin, she envisions herself playing the dramatic role of a divine spirit-possessed medium. Her flawless step-by-step plan begins with arriving early, followed by staging a dramatic, soul-stirring divine revelation inside the shrine. Finally, she will deliver Chaska's alleged decree, steering the heartbroken parents straight to their long-lost son.
This divine setup perfectly aligns with her previous psychic claims, ensuring her absolute credibility. Resolving to secure the Duchess's blessing first, she decides to use her fictitious pregnancy as the perfect public cover for her pilgrimage. Resolved to set things right, he realizes he must reveal his deepest secret to her before it is too late. A quiet knock at the secret study bookcase breaks Judith's focus, echoing softly through her private chambers. Startled, she calls out to the mysterious guest, cautiously granting him entry into her room. Though she relies heavily on his vast intelligence, she grows deeply unsettled by his habit of appearing unannounced. As the secret passage slides open, the master steps forward, curious if she received his latest message. Locking eyes with him, Judith calmly confirms that his written dispatch has safely reached her hands. But as a heavy, tense atmosphere suddenly settles in the room, she sheepishly wonders if she has done something wrong. Seeing her stiffen, the master offers a lighthearted chuckle, teasingly asking if they truly need a formal excuse to meet. Disarmed by his unusually playful mood, Judith remains completely baffled, struggling to find her composure. She gently explains that her concern is entirely for the Duke's peace of mind, not her own personal discomfort. Pointing out his invasive habits, she notes that having an uninvited shadow slipping through one's home would terrify anyone. Determined to establish boundaries, she offers a sweet, radiant smile that completely softens her firm scolding. She teasingly suggests he should follow his own example, delivering letters through a mutual friend like Hugh instead of sneaking around. Ready to wrap up their meeting, she mentions needing the Duchess's permission to leave the estate, catching him completely off guard. When she casually refers to the Duchess as her own mother, the host freezes in utter disbelief. Swallowing a shock, he quietly takes in her words, his mind racing with unspoken questions. Judith warmly reflects on the Duchess's profound, gentle kindness, finding it almost superior to the warmth of her own flesh and blood. Her touching words trigger a sudden, deeply buried ache within the enigmatic master, leaving him profoundly thoughtful. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he reveals the stark contrast of his own painful, complicated maternal history. Recalling the day he fell into her arms in pure anguish, Judith finally understands the source of his devastating sorrow. Struggling to find comforting words, she realizes how little she actually knows about this incredibly guarded, secretive man. Breaking the heavy silence, the master abruptly shifts focus, asking about her impending travel plans. With a bright, confident gaze, she reveals her destination is none other than the sacred shrine of the last priestess. The master's posture stiffens instantly, a dark shadow passing over his face as he demands to know her purpose. Resorting to her perfect public excuse, she playfully mentions praying for her fictitious child, knowing he is well aware of the lie. Stepping closer, his tone turns deadly serious as he reminds her that the secluded sanctuary yields absolutely no answers. He demands to know if this dangerous journey is truly expected of a fake duchess, crossing a highly sensitive boundary. His cold, prying questions touch a raw nerve, causing her gentle smile to vanish in an instant. Annoyed, Judith flatly reminds him that her personal actions and secret plans are absolutely none of his business. Realizing his blunder, he quickly backs down, though he warns that her deep involvement in the family's affairs is getting out of hand. He coldly remarks that her intense devotion makes it incredibly easy to forget she is merely playing a part. Stung by his harsh reminder, she quickly hardens her expression, bitterly agreeing that she is nothing more than hired help. Gathering her skirts, she delivers a frosty parting shot, declaring she must seek her real employer's permission before departing. With a resounding heavy thud, the double door slams shut behind her, leaving a chilling silence in her wake. Leaning against the wall, Judith instantly regrets her heated emotional outburst, clutching her face in deep embarrassment. Walking down the grand corridor, she mutters in frustration, convinced that the master's strange off-kilter behavior is entirely to blame. She bitterly recalls how he pointlessly emphasized her temporary status as if she needed to be reminded of her place. Yet a deep sadness washes over her as she admits to herself that her anger stems from her secret desire to stay. Staring out at the gathering storm, she resolves to set their misunderstandings aside and speak with him properly next time. Back inside, the master is consumed by immediate regret, realizing his petty jealousy drove him to ruthlessly crush another's hope. Though he temporarily eliminated a romantic rival, his petty victory only brings a wave of intense, suffocating anxiety. He bitterly notes that the young physician has the luxury of standing proudly and openly by her side, unlike himself. Trapped behind a mask of secrets, he despises his own complicated double life, feeling completely unworthy of her compared to an honest man. Looking down at his disguise, he is harshly reminded that without his true identity as Iki Meius, his relationship with Judith is built on a grand lie. He realizes with absolute dread that without his true name, he has no right to stand before her. Deeply remorseful, he admits that the mention of Chaska's shrine caused his carefully guarded emotions to completely unravel. Looking out over his empty office, he decides he must find Judith immediately to offer a sincere, heartfelt apology. Spotting his hurried departure, his loyal aide inquires if he is heading out into the torrential downpour. Grabbing his umbrella, the master confirms his short absence, his heart set firmly on reaching her. Standing beneath the pouring rain, he reflects on the undeniable hand of fate that is finally drawing him toward his past.
The sacred shrine of the legendary priestess stood silently beneath the cold, unrelenting downpour, bathed in a mystical violet glow.
On the slick wooden steps, glowing candles flickered defiantly against the heavy sheets of rain, mirroring the rumors of their eternal fire.
Observing from the shadows, the master marveled at the unyielding flames as a sea of desperate souls lined up outside, hoping for a miracle. Among the crowd stood the grieving Marquis and Marchioness, huddled under a dark umbrella, still desperately praying for their lost son. He quickly realized Judith had positioned herself perfectly nearby, though her true intentions for approaching the noble couple remained a mystery to him. Dressed in simple attire with her face veiled, she moved with quiet grace, likely acting on the Duchess's advice to keep a low profile. He reasoned that the family would wait to announce her supposed pregnancy until the grandeur of the upcoming imperial banquet. But as he watched her every move from a distance, a sudden wave of self-awareness hit him, making him feel like an unwanted stalker. Shaking off his embarrassment, he convinced himself he was simply waiting for the right moment to speak without disrupting her plans. Steely resolve filled his heart as he watched her disappear inside, determined to approach her the second she stepped back out. Suddenly, a deafening crack of thunder shattered the air as a violent bolt of lightning struck the sanctuary, illuminating the stormy sky. In an instant, the immortal purple flames were brutally snuffed out, leaving behind nothing but rising plumes of smoke and absolute darkness. A collective gasp of terror rippled through the startled crowd as the supernatural phenomenon sent shockwaves of panic through the onlookers. Whispers of a terrifying curse from the last priestess filled the air, causing the master's eyes to widen in sheer disbelief. Casting his umbrella aside, he sprinted desperately toward the shrine, driven by a sudden, choking panic for Judith's safety. Fear gnawed at his soul as the frantic voices of the crowd echoed in his ears, his mind racing with terrifying thoughts of ancient curses. Bursting through the heavy entrance, he stumbled onto the damp floor, his heart hammering wildly against his ribs. Overwhelmed by raw emotion, he cried out into the cavernous room, demanding to know why his mother's spirit would lash out in such a cruel way. High above, the painted portrait of the legendary shamaness Chaska stared down back at him with silent, haunting sorrow. Raindrops mingled with the hot tears spilling down his face as he stood before her image, completely consumed by his agonizing past. With his last shred of strength, he roared Judith's name into the dark, echoing sanctuary, desperate to find her. Long before he became the masked master of the Information Guild, Meius had lived a life of pure, unadulterated happiness. As the cherished young lord of the wealthy and powerful House Meius, the future ahead of him seemed exceptionally bright and secure. Surrounded by loving parents and a sweet younger brother, he truly believed that his perfect world would last forever. Even when political tensions flared between his family and the throne, he trusted that his close bond with the crown prince would protect them all. But just as he successfully secured his rightful position as the sole heir, his flawless life began to violently unravel. Under the cold light of the moon, the trusted family physician Bart approached him with a truth too devastating to comprehend. Bart warned the young lord that if he stopped drinking his daily tea, the golden hair of House Meius would soon be replaced by dark strands. To his absolute horror, Ekian soon discovered fallen black hairs in his palm, proving the physician's words were entirely true. Seeing his despair, the cold physician handed him 2 old medical journals, forcing him to confront his fabricated existence. One journal belonged to the Duchess Isabella, while the other detailed Ekian's own mysterious medical history from infancy. He learned that during the year of his birth, the Duke and Duchess had taken a long, unexplained journey to the remote Bartay Island. There, the noble couple had discovered an abandoned baby, delaying their return to the capital for 2 entire years to hide the truth. The child they took in was indeed Ekian, exposing the massive 10-month gap in the Duchess's personal journals. Bart noted with chilling fascination that the boy had grown unnaturally fast, appearing as a 2-year-old in a fraction of the time. Refusing to listen to any more lies, Ekian angrily declared he would ask his parents only for Bart to drop a bombshell about his imperial lineage. Dumbfounded, the young heir could only stare in shock as the reality of his forbidden blood began to sink in. Bart explained that those of the royal line blessed by the moon carried a unique trait that separated them from all common mortals. Drawing a sharp dagger, the physician pressed the weapon into Ekian's hands, challenging him to test the ancient legend of healing. With a trembling hand, Ekian sliced into his own flesh, bracing himself for the excruciating pain of the wound. But as the blade withdrew, a brilliant warm light erupted from the slash, mending his torn skin in a matter of seconds. He watched in stunned silence as the deep cut vanished completely beneath the celestial glow, leaving his hand flawless once more. The blood-stained dagger clattered to the floor, leaving Ekian to face the undeniable, terrifying truth of his imperial heritage. It was the miraculous blessing of the moon, a divine privilege reserved solely for those who carried the sacred blood of the empire. Bart coldly reminded him that he was the only one who held this dangerous secret, urging him to make a choice out of loyalty. He warned the young lord that he must leave immediately, rather than risk staining the proud House Meius with forbidden imperial blood. Believing he was protecting his beloved family from ruin, Ekian chose to walk away into the night, abandoning his title and inheritance forever. Years later, after discovering Bart was never actually loyal to the Duke, a hardened Enekian confronted the imprisoned physician to learn his true motives. Trapped behind iron bars, the bloody physician merely sneered, asking if His Cursed Highness was curious about his origins. With a wicked, mocking grin, Bart whispered the ultimate question, asking if he truly wished to know the identity of his birth mother. The cold prison bars offer no comfort as Bart leans in, his smile twisting into a venomous sneer. He whispers the forbidden truth that threatens to shatter the young lord's entire reality. His voice is a chilling hiss, revealing that Ekian was born of a horrific forced union. Born from defilement, the priestess harbored a bitter hatred, laying a dark prophecy that the emperor would die by his own son's hands. Terrified of the curse, the emperor ordered the infant's death, yet feared the priestess's warning that killing the child would bring ruin to the executioner. Instead of slaughter, a merciful servant cast the baby into the sea, letting fate carry him to the shores where the Duke and Duchess would find him. Out of pure love, the Duke and Duchess raised the child as their own, hiding his dangerous bloodline from the world. Meanwhile, the emperor watched from the shadows, eagerly waiting for the cursed child to destroy House Meius from within. Racked with confusion, Ekian demands to know why he was driven away if his inheritance was part of the emperor's grand destructive design. Bart confesses his original mission was to slowly poison House Meius, a task meant to secure his place as the emperor's ultimate agent. But everything changed when the Duke and Duchess took Ekian in, altering the tragic trajectory of the household. The emperor eventually halted the poison, preferring the poetic cruelty of watching the Duke be destroyed by the very boy he raised as his heir. Bart fully expected the family to discard Ekian once their biological son, Carl, was born, leaving the cursed heir to rot. Yet the family's love proved unbreakable. They never cast him aside, watching proudly as he grew into a noble young man. Frustrated by this unexpected familial devotion, Bart tried to contact the emperor, only to be met with absolute chilling silence. It was in that moment of silence that Bart realized he was nothing more than an abandoned piece on the emperor's chessboard. Piecing the fragments together, Ekian realizes Bart manipulated his exile to protect him from the emperor's looming wrath. By forcing Ekian to flee, Bart ensured the boy escaped the deadly snare of the capital, though it cost Ekian his home. With the cursed child gone, the emperor's grand play was shattered, leaving him with no weapon left to wield. Bart lets out a hollow, mocking laugh, asking if this cruel dance of fate isn't the most entertaining tale he's ever heard. Outside, the storm rages on, but inside the shrine grounds, Judith's plans are moving forward with surprising ease. Moving swiftly through the sparse crowd, she positions herself perfectly right before the grieving Marquis and Marquiness. Her plan is simple yet daring. She will emerge from the sanctuary claiming to have received a divine revelation. Yet, a sudden chill runs down her spine as she wonders if invoking the sacred priestess's name will invite a divine curse. Shaking off her hesitation, she steels her resolve, convincing herself that her pure intentions will shield her from wrath. Stepping across the threshold, she jokes to herself that she has survived far more terrifying monsters, like crushing debt. The interior of the sanctuary is breathtakingly pristine, bathed in a mystical everlasting violet glow that defies the passage of time. Just as she begins to sense an unnatural energy in the air, the heavy silence is suddenly broken. Panic seizes her heart as the legendary immortal candle is abruptly snuffed out before her very eyes. Terrified she has deeply offended the spirits, Judith throws herself to the ground, begging the priestess for mercy. She babbles a frantic prayer, explaining her desperate plight while the wind outside begins to howl like a raging beast. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the roaring wind, speaking her true name with echoing celestial authority. As she looks up, she is paralyzed by the sight of glowing bare feet descending gently from the heavens above. Floating majestically before her is the breathtaking spirit of the legendary priestess herself, radiant with divine light. Dumbfounded, Judith can only stare, realizing the myths of the sanctuary's miraculous power were entirely real. Trembling, Judith musters the courage to ask how a sacred, ancient spirit could possibly know her humble name. The spirit softly explains that though she is no longer of the living world, her soul remains bound to the endless flow of time. Regret washes over Judith as she realizes the sheer gravity of her reckless, desperate plan. Trembling from head to toe, she bows her head once more, bracing herself for divine retribution. She desperately defends her actions, explaining that she only wanted to use her foreknowledge to help a grieving family. To her utter shock, Chaska offers a warm, gentle smile, telling her she has no objection to her borrowing her name. The priestess drops a staggering revelation. She is the very reason Judith was granted knowledge of the future. To explain this cosmic connection, the priestess begins to recount the tragic actions of her final moments on Earth. She reveals she once bore a Sona child brought into the world through a cruel and unwanted union. Consumed by hatred, she cursed her own newborn only to be instantly crushed by an agonizing eternal regret. For no matter how the child was conceived, he was innocent, yet her curse had already sealed his tragic fate. Desperate to undo her mistake, she used her sacred power to peer into her son's timeline. To her horror, she saw that her curse would lead him to a miserable, lonely death and absolute despair. Thus, she spent centuries wandering the currents of time, searching for a soul who could change his destiny, until she found Judith. And she crossed paths with Judith at the exact moment of her own tragic final breath. Chaska reveals the ultimate truth. She was the one who orchestrated Judith's knowledge of the future, weaving those vital memories into a book. Judith gasps, her mind racing as she tries to comprehend the sheer scale of the priestess's divine intervention. Nodding gently, Chaska clarifies that Judith's soul was never randomly thrust into a novel, but guided by a higher purpose. The priestess explained she arranged everything so Judith would inherit this knowledge naturally, unlocking those locked memories at the perfect moment. Tears of profound relief well in Judith's eyes as she whispers her deepest gratitude to the ancient spirit. Bowing low, Judith confesses that this divine foresight was the only reason she managed to survive her own tragic fate. Filled with newfound purpose, she vows to take full responsibility and do whatever it takes to save the priestess's cursed son. Amused by Judith's fiery determination, the gentle priestess lets out a soft, melodic laugh. Realizing she might have overreacted, Judith asks why the priestess's soul still lingers in this realm instead of passing on. Chaska smiles, her gaze overflowing with a mother's eternal warmth and unspoken longing. With her remaining time fading, the priestess prepares to ask one final crucial favor of the young woman. Reaching out with a tender, ethereal hand, Chaska gently caresses Judith, bridging the gap between life and death. Her voice soft as a lullaby, she begs Judith to guide her son toward the path of true happiness. As she holds Judith in a warm, spiritual embrace, the heavy burden Chaska carried for centuries finally begins to lift. Sensing the energy starting to shift, Judith looks up, realizing their precious moment together is drawing to a close. With her divine mission complete, the priestess's luminous spirit ascends back into the heavens, leaving behind a fading trail of stardust. A sudden sharp snap echoes through the silent chamber, breaking the spell of the sacred sanctuary. In an instant, the pristine sanctuary collapses into ancient ruins, proving it was only the priestess's divine presence holding back the decay of time. Suddenly, the weakened ceiling begins to give way, threatening to bury Judith under heavy stone debris. Before the rubble can crush her, a familiar figure bursts through the chaos, shielding her with his own body. Looking up into the eyes of her masked savior, Judith immediately recognizes the commanding presence of her mysterious master. Stunned, Judith realizes this is the very first time she has ever heard his true, undisguised voice. Embarrassed by her intense gaze, the master clears his throat while Judith silently marvels at how handsome his voice sounds. He dryly notes that she seems perfectly fine, while she cheerfully admits she was only a little startled by the sudden collapse. She struggles to explain herself as a tense, awkward silence briefly settles over the ruined sanctuary. Suddenly, voices echo from the threshold, misinterpreting the master's desperate rescue as the frantic actions of a worried lover. Marquise and Marchioness Soden walk in, teasingly pointing out how he rushed in like lightning to protect the one he loves. Assessing the unstable ruins, the noble couple warns them that the temple is on the verge of complete collapse and they must flee. As they move, Judith looks at her master with a playful glint in her eyes, eager to tease him. She playfully asks if he really dashed across the grounds like a bolt of lightning just to save her. Dodging her teasing questions, the flustered master walks faster, grumbling that they need to focus on escaping. Looking back at the decaying shrine, Judith silently thanks the priestess, even though she still has no idea who her son actually is. The master calls out to her, urging her to hurry as the storm outside intensifies. Smiling warmly, Judith asks if he's worrying about her again, to which he softly tells her to just stay close by his side. Meanwhile, behind them, the remnants of the ancient temple begin to trigger a cascade of world-altering changes. The magical wards that held the structure together for centuries completely dissolve, releasing the last of the divine energy. With a thunderous roar, the sacred monument crumbles entirely to dust, ending an era of mythical protection. Walking away from the ruins, the group makes their way back to safety as the rain washes over the stone path. The Marquis marvels at the sudden collapse, completely stunned by how quickly a historic sanctuary could vanish. Seizing the moment to clear the air, Judith brightly declares to the couple that the master is definitely not her lover. When the Marquis assumes it must be unrequited love, Judith drops a massive bombshell, casually revealing she is already married. Dumbfounded, the Marquis stammers in disbelief as Judith cheerfully confirms she has a husband, leaving them to wonder who the master is. The couple immediately jumps to a scandalous conclusion, whispering that the masked master is hiding his identity because of an illicit affair. Brushing off their wild misunderstandings, Judith turns to the noble couple, ready to deliver the divine revelation. The Marquis and Marchioness look at her with deep curiosity, wondering what serious matter she wishes to discuss. Taking a deep breath, Judith prepares to play her part, utilizing the knowledge she gained to alter the course of destiny. But the moment the name Meius leaves her lips, the Marquis freezes, his umbrella slipping from his trembling hand. A chilling realization washes over the Marquis as his mind races back to a highly confidential document. He stammers in sheer shock, wondering if Judith was the mysterious woman who had submitted that fateful marriage registration. Smiling softly, Judith confirms her identity, revealing she is indeed the wife of the long-lost heir of House Meius. Marquis Soden stammers in utter shock, struggling to understand why a pregnant woman whose marriage remains unannounced would seek such a critical meeting. Closing her eyes, Judith calmly confirms his suspicion, bracing herself to deliver a reality-shattering truth. She reveals that right before the sacred temple collapsed, she heard the ancient priestess's voice calling out to her. Judith drops a massive bombshell, revealing that the priestess spoke of the Marquise's long-lost eldest son residing within the Meius duchy. Overwhelmed by shock, the Marchioness nearly collapses into her husband's arms as they struggle to process this unbelievable miracle. Judith gently cautions them that while it is only a spirit's message, it is a lead they absolutely must investigate. Gripped by sudden desperate hope, the tearful Marchioness begs her husband to rush to the ducal estate immediately. The Marquis tries to calm his weeping wife, his own heart pounding at the sudden prospect of finding their child. Holding his distraught wife close, the Marquis realizes that in his years of endless grief, he had completely overlooked this possibility. Seeing an opportunity, the Marquis desperately asks Judith if they may accompany her to the ducal estate as her personal guests. Smiling warmly, Judith immediately weaves off their worries, assuring them that their presence would be entirely welcome. She reassures the anxious couple that the Duke of Meius will undoubtedly understand the gravity of their desperate situation. Tears of profound gratitude fill the couple's eyes as they thank the young Duchess, promising to never forget her immense kindness. As they prepare to depart, a sharp, commanding voice suddenly rings out behind them, halting their steps. The master steps forward, expressing deep skepticism that the dying priestess would waste her remaining strength on a stranger's child. Offended by his coldness, the Marquis passionately argues that a parent's desperate love is a force that transcends even death. The master fires back with uncharacteristic fury, shouting that a parent should naturally worry about their own flesh and blood. The sudden, intense outburst catches everyone off guard, leaving the noble couple completely baffled by his heated reaction. Whispering quietly, the couple agrees that the masked master seems completely unhinged, trailing after a married woman like a maniac. Diffusing the tension, Judith brightly bids the noble couple to head on ahead, promising to follow closely behind. Turning to her master, Judith asks what could possibly be causing him to lose his usual cool composure. To her surprise, the master reveals his knowledge of the priestess's son, proving his incredible reach as an information guild leader. Clutching his clothes in sheer desperation, the master begs her for any further details, offering to pay any price. Judith stares at him, deeply unsettled by how utterly desperate and unlike himself her master has suddenly become. She recalls that in all their past dealings, the master was always completely laid back, never prying into personal matters. As she looks at his trembling, anxious form, a startling, incredible realization begins to dawn in Judith's mind. While part of her is tempted by the thought of his immense wealth, her curiosity about his true identity grows even stronger. Knowing how much he has helped her, Judith decides it would be cruel and wrong to keep him in the dark. Mustering her resolve, Judith carefully admits that the legendary priestess did indeed leave behind one final message. However, she hesitates, explaining that she isn't sure if it is truly her place to reveal someone else's tragic story. To ease his torment, Judith offers him an invitation to the Meius ducal estate alongside her, begging him to be satisfied for now. She smiles warmly, hinting that following the priestess's divine guidance will surely lead him to the answers he seeks. Hearing their cue, they realize they must hurry back as the Marquis and Marchioness are eagerly waiting for them. Expressing his quiet gratitude to Judith, the master steps back as they make their way toward the awaiting carriage. Inside the carriage, a bittersweet memory of a beloved younger brother suddenly echoes in the master's mind. He vividly remembers a younger version of himself taking his bright, cheerful brother Carl to see an art exhibition. His younger brother had teased him about his taste in abstract art while they happily discussed gathering their energy first. He recalls treating his beloved little brother to his favorite rabbit pudding, watching his face light up with pure joy. In those simple, fleeting moments of the past, his little brother had joyfully proclaimed that he was the best. Clutching his chest in the present, the master is overwhelmed with sorrow, riding in the very same carriage they once shared. He steels his resolve, deciding he will tell his mother he is simply accompanying Judith to repay a vital favor. Across from him, Judith agrees that presenting him as an interested business partner is the perfect excuse for the Duchess. Breaking the heavy silence, the master quietly asks if she was shocked by his sudden, aggressive intervention earlier. Judith softly admits she was surprised, but trusted that a man of his stature must have had a deeply personal reason. Apologizing for his behavior, the master admits the word fake struck a painful nerve, causing him to react poorly. Judith laughs off the tension, explaining that she simply wanted to stay in the warm ducal estate and felt protective of it. The master smiles warmly, admitting he had sought her out to apologize, relieved to find they are on the same wavelength. Judith proudly notes that her greatest strength is her ability to accept and adapt to whatever life throws her way. Reassuring him she bears no grudge, she gently reminds him that she didn't exactly grow up in an ordinary, loving household. She recalls her own painful past, where her neglectful mother abandoned her to indulge in her own scandalous, illicit affairs. Growing up amidst such cold neglect, Judith had no choice but to simply accept her harsh reality. She realized early on that letting go of expectations was the only way to shield her young heart from the crushing pain of abandonment. Hearing of her tragic past, the master feels a deep wave of sympathy for the heavy burden she carried all alone. Brushing off his concern, Judith lightly points out that her father, Baron Aelin, was just as disappointing. But her words strike an unexpected chord, causing the master to freeze in sudden, painful realization.
A heavy silence fills the carriage as he struggles to process the depth of her silent, lifelong endurance.
Judith continues softly, explaining that resigning herself to her fate was simply a survival mechanism she mastered as a child. Looking at her, the master is struck by how her words mirror his own painful compromises with fate. Her gentle smile only highlights the profound sorrow hidden beneath years of forced emotional resilience. A quiet understanding washes over the master as he finally understands the true meaning behind her easygoing nature. Caught off guard by his sudden change in demeanor, Judith tilts her head in mild confusion. He points out that constantly accepting everything is just a polite way of giving up on her own happiness. Leaning forward, he earnestly begs her to stop burying her feelings and never give up on herself again. In this quiet, intimate moment, his sincere plea hangs in the air, offering her a warmth she has never known. Judith stares at him in sheer disbelief, her heart fluttering at his genuine concern for her well-being. A soft, genuine smile spreads across her face as she processes his surprisingly sweet words. Teasing him gently, she asks if his own mask is a sign that he has also given up on something precious. Chuckling softly, the master admits she is truly extraordinary, while Judith playfully asks if he only just realized. Beaming with joy, Judith extends her hand, asking if this means they have officially reconciled their differences. The master firmly takes her hand, sealing a newfound bond of deep trust and mutual understanding between them. The master playfully denies they ever fought, prompting Judith to laughingly agree that she must have imagined it. Their shared laughter echoes within the carriage, completely melting away the lingering shadows of their painful pasts. Judith takes the opportunity to suggest they can meet as friends, but the master suddenly halts her with a serious gaze. He confesses that she is the only person in the entire world he has ever truly opened his heart to. Flustered by his intense honesty, Judith tries to downplay it, playfully insisting their frequent meetings make them close by default. Smiling warmly, the master sincerely agrees, admitting that Judith is indeed the closest person to his heart. Despite their closeness, Judith gently warns him to be extra cautious when sneaking into the ducal estate from now on. Deep in thought, the master wonders if his strict monitoring of Hud Ramas was perhaps a bit too overprotective. He quickly steels his resolve, refusing to let his guard down while another man lingers around his precious Judith. He smugly recalls reminding the young man of his commoner status, hoping the boy will gracefully back away on his own. Satisfied with his strategic warnings, the master enjoys his sweet snack as their carriage finally nears its destination. He silently hopes the young commoner truly cares enough about Judith's future to walk away without a fight. Meanwhile, inside the Meius estate, the Duchess is frantically sorting through piles of exquisite jewelry, rejecting every piece. She dismisses another priceless necklace, declaring it far too recognizable for Judith's grand debut into high society. Determined to make Judith shine, the Duchess decides to summon every master jeweler in the empire to create a custom masterpiece. The Duke of Meius sits nearby, amused by his wife's intense dedication to perfecting their young daughter-in-law's flawless debut. The Duchess fiercely declares that Judith's introduction to the imperial court must be absolutely flawless, regardless of the immense cost. Smiling warmly, the Duke agrees, hoping Judith's breathtaking beauty will capture the hearts of the entire high society. Above all, the noble couple desires a partner who will truly cherish Judith, prioritizing her lifelong happiness over political alliances. Their grand planning is suddenly interrupted by a respectful knock at the door, signaling an urgent arrival. The butler steps in to announce Judith's return, dropping the shocking news that she has brought the Marquis and Marchioness of Soden with her. He explains that Judith claims to have received a divine, final revelation from the temple priestess right before its sudden collapse. The Duke and Duchess exchange stunned looks, immediately realizing that this spiritual journey was far more critical than they ever imagined. Steeling their resolve, the noble couple prepares to greet their esteemed guests and uncover the truth behind this miraculous revelation. Gathered in the lavish parlor, the Duchess of Meius offers her deepest, heartfelt sympathy for the years of painful grief the Soden couple has endured. The Duke readily offers his full cooperation, though he pragmatically warns that searching for a commoner with brown hair and green eyes will be like finding a needle in a haystack. Eyes shining with renewed hope, the Marchioness reveals that her lost child possesses a highly unique secret physical trait. She explains that a tiny, hidden mole rests perfectly along the lash line of his left eye, visible only when his eyelids are closed. Tears stream down her face as she whispers that only a mother who lovingly cradled her baby would ever know of such a hidden mark. Touched by her words, the Duchess of Meius smiles warmly, recalling the endearing, flat fingernail of her own beloved son, Ekian, whom she also lost too soon. The Marchioness of Soden nods weakly, confirming that her maternal memories of her lost child are absolutely real and undeniable. Seizing the opportunity, the Duke of Meius commands his steward to immediately round up every servant in the estate matching that description. With a respectful bow, the head steward quickly departs to execute his lord's urgent command. The room remains tense as the Duchess of Meius gently sets down her teacup, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She warmly reassures the grieving mother that the priestess's divine guidance will surely lead them to her lost son. In return, the Marchioness offers her own words of comfort, hoping the Duchess's own missing son, Ekian, will also return home one day. Looking warmly at Judith, the noblewomen shower her with praise, admiring her kind nature and exceptional brilliance. The Marchioness sighs wistfully, dreaming of the day her own son returns and finds a partner to share such a beautiful bond. Judith watches them with a soft smile, deeply relieved that her actions could bring even a small glimmer of hope to these grieving hearts. Yet, amidst the warmth, a lingering sense of unease begins to creep into her mind. She glances at her mysterious companion, noting his tense, distant demeanor and wondering if he is frustrated by the lack of answers. The heavy doors slide open as the head steward returns, announcing the arrival of the servants who fit the description. Tense, hurried footsteps echo across the polished marble floor as a line of young men enters the parlor. Standing before the nobles, the gathered servants bow deeply, each displaying the specific features the Marquis had requested. Stepping forward, the Duke instructs the young men to close their eyes so they can search for the hidden physical trait. He gently invites the Marchioness to inspect them herself, urging her to take all the time she needs to find her boy. Meanwhile, Judith scans the lineup in confusion, suddenly realizing that Dr. Hud Ramus is noticeably absent from the group. Suddenly, Judith's eyes widen in sheer shock as she spots a perfect tiny mole on the lash line of one servant. The Marquis desperately presses him for details about his adoption, but the young man sadly reveals his adoptive parents passed away long ago. Feigning vulnerability, the servant claims he remembers nothing of his early childhood other than the fact that he was taken in. Overcome with raw emotion, the noble couple tearfully confesses that they believe he might be their long-lost son. The servant quickly suggests there is a contact in the far south who might possess the records to confirm his true identity. When the eager Marquis offers to travel with him, the servant quickly backtracks, insisting he should make the journey alone to avoid wasting their time. He smoothly shifts the conversation, asking the emotional nobles to merely fund his hefty travel expenses for the long journey. But before any transaction can be made, a sharp voice cuts through the room, halting the entire parlor in its tracks. Judith steps forward with fierce determination, declaring that there is one final detail they must verify before anyone leaves. Her commanding presence commands the attention of everyone in the room as she stares down the suspect servant. The young servant falters under her intense gaze, nervously questioning what could possibly be left to confirm. Holding up a pristine white cloth, Judith sharply points out how bizarrely calm and calculating he is for someone who supposedly just found his parents. Ignoring his protests, Judith lunges forward, aggressively rubbing his closed eyelid with the damp cloth as he groans in pain. Gasping in mock surprise, Judith pulls the cloth away to reveal that the supposedly permanent mole has completely vanished. Exposed in an instant, the fake servant breaks into a cold sweat, his face twisting in raw panic as his elaborate lie crumbles. A thunderous rage fills the room as the Duke demands to know how such a vital family secret was leaked to an outsider. Judith calmly deduces that the culprit must be the maid who served their tea earlier, having eavesdropped on their private conversation. She explains how the greedy maid must have overheard the Marchioness's tearful description and quickly hatched a sinister plot. The conspirators had hastily drawn a realistic mole onto the complicit servant's eyelid to stage a flawless reunion. Judith notes that their ultimate goal, be it extorting vast fortunes or claiming a noble title, remains a dangerous mystery. When the cornered man desperately protests, Judith ruthlessly counters that the wipeable mole was designed so he could escape if the real heir ever surfaced. Devastated by the cruel deception, the Marchioness collapses into her husband's arms, sobbing over her shattered hopes. Gently taking her hand, Judith implores the weeping mother not to let this foul scheme break her spirit. She urges them to stay strong, reminding them that one key candidate has yet to be tested. The Duke's eyes light up as he suddenly realizes that his household staff extends far beyond the typical servants. Beaming with absolute confidence, Judith confirms that the missing person possesses those exact fateful features. The head steward quickly interjects, promising to summon Dr. Hud Ramus the moment he returns from his brief absence. With the trap firmly laid, Judith prepares to bring this deceptive game to a definitive end. The heavy atmosphere settles over the parlor as the absolute truth of the servant's malicious deceit stands fully exposed. Standing as a shield of truth, Judith points an accusing finger at the fraud, demanding absolute accountability for his cruel lies. His dreams of wealth shattered, the impostor glares at Judith with pure venomous hatred, cursing his sudden misfortune. Consumed by blinding fury, the desperate man suddenly lunges directly at Judith, threatening to harm her in his madness. But before his violent strike can land, a swift, powerful blow echoes through the parlor, stopping the threat cold.
Gasping in shock, Judith looks up to see her mysterious master standing protectively before her.
On the floor, the exposed frog groans in agony from the swift neutralizing blow.
Beaming with immense gratitude, Judith thanks her master for arriving like a flash of lightning to save her. With a cold, calculating gaze, the masked man reveals that the impostor's parents indeed passed away, but he was never adopted.
The Marquise and Marchioness of Soden gasp in sheer disbelief, demanding to know how he could possibly possess such intimate details.
Standing tall, the mysterious master confidently explains that such deep secrets are easily uncovered by the leader of an information guild.
Realizing his presence is no longer needed, the enigmatic leader decides it is time to quietly withdraw from the grand parlor.
Offering a polite, distant bow, the masked master bids them farewell and begins to take his leave.
The Duchess of Meius watches his departure in silence, a sudden heavy wave of familiarity washing over her. A flicker of deep suspicion crosses her eyes, wondering if there is a far deeper secret behind the mysterious stranger.
Back in his private, dimly lit study, the exhausted young man tosses the investigative documents onto his desk with a heavy sigh.
Slipping off his elegant mask, he laments that he always knew this complex web of secrets would eventually unravel. His mind drifts back to the tragic poisoning incident in Vane, which had driven him to secretly protect his beloved family. He bitterly recalls knowing from the very start that the greedy servant's claims were nothing but elaborate lies.
Yet, a lingering hesitation had held him back, the sudden, striking suspicion that Dr. Hud Ramus was the true lost heir.
He contemplates the immense weight of what it would mean if Hud Ramus truly belonged to the noble house Soden. With his noble status restored, the doctor would have no reason to hide his true feelings or keep his distance. Moreover, Judith was their family savior, and no one in high society would ever dare oppose their union. In his mind's eye, he vividly pictures the perfect romantic future the two of them would inevitably build together. This painful realization of his own jealousy had completely paralyzed him, preventing him from acting sooner. Now he is left to drown in his own bitter guilt, utterly despising himself for letting his personal feelings cloud his judgment. From the shadows, his heart aches with silent longing as he looks upon the mother he cannot yet openly embrace. He nervously recalls how intently she had stared at him, as though her maternal instincts were clawing at the truth. Tossing his mask aside, he fears that his mother's sharp eyes might have already pieced together his secret identity. He looks down at his hand, realizing she might have recognized a uniquely flat shape of his fingernail, a tiny trait he had never even noticed himself. Shaking his head in determination, he realizes he can no longer remain passive while his secrets hang in the balance. Standing up resolutely, he prepares to return to the ducal estate, even if it means he won't be able to see Judith for some time. He knows that this time the stakes are higher than ever, as his own mother is the one he must carefully deceive. Meanwhile, in the grand drawing room, the Duke and Duchess reflect on the astonishing revelation that Hud Ramus is the lost heir. The Duke expresses his profound relief and marvels at how Judith has once again managed to perform an absolute miracle. Sipping her tea, the Duchess warmly praises Judith's brilliant intuition, amazed by how flawlessly she exposed the fraudulent servant. The Duke nods in complete agreement, noting that her remarkable wisdom and composure will serve her well in high society. Standing silently in the shadows, the masked master listens in as the Duke expresses his relief for Judith's bright future. But the masked young man's heart suddenly stops as the Duke casually shifts the conversation to the topic of Judith's remarriage. The Duke fiercely declares that he will keep a hawk-like watch at the upcoming imperial banquet to keep any deserving suitors away. Smiling softly, the Duchess teasingly suggests that the perfect candidate for Judith might have already made his appearance. The Duke is instantly intrigued, though he firmly asserts that Judith's personal wishes must always come first. With a knowing smile, the Duchess begins to detail her theory as she pours another cup of tea. She envisions the beautiful, harmonious bond that has quietly been blossoming between Judith and the young doctor. Hidden in the darkness, the young master's eyes widen in sheer shock and jealousy at his mother's romantic pairing. The Duchess happily notes that young Master Soden's deep affection for Judith is incredibly obvious to everyone but her. The young master scoffs internally, knowing Judith's simple-minded nature makes her completely oblivious to the young doctor's subtle advances. The Duke warmly agrees, recalling how exceptionally kind and attentive the young man had behaved during their meeting. He highly praises the doctor's deep respect and humility for choosing to keep the name his adoptive parents gave him. The Duchess adds that his incredible sense of responsibility shone through when he refused to leave his post until a replacement was found. However, she suddenly worries if the prestigious Soden family will easily accept a daughter-in-law who has been married before. Overcome with sudden passion, the Duchess slams her teacup down, splashing the warm liquid as she defends her beloved daughter-in-law. She fiercely declares that since Judith reunited them with their lost son, any loving parent should only care about their child's ultimate happiness. The Duke agrees, though they both know that high society's strict traditions will make this a challenging path. Taking a fierce gulp of her tea, the Duchess resolves to stand firmly by Judith's side, ready to fight any noble who opposes her joy. Determined to protect those she loves, the Duchess resolves never to stand idly by again. A tense silence lingers over the room as her words hang heavily in the air. Despite their hopes, they worry Judith's heart might not easily align with the young doctor's. Observing her fierce protectiveness, the Duke gently notes how unusually emotional his wife has become. She softly admits her deep remorse, feeling an overwhelming sense of guilt toward gentle Judith. Her thoughts drift unexpectedly to the mysterious masked master whom she mistakenly knows only as the guild leader.
With a longing gaze, she confesses that the stranger bears a striking resemblance to her lost son.
Eavesdropping from the shadows, the young master clenches his fist as his mother's sorrow deepens his guilt.
She fears her selfish desire for her son's memory has somehow burdened Judith's own future. The Duke reassures her, promising to support whatever path Judith chooses for her own happiness. Still, the heavy burden of gratitude and regret continues to weigh on the Duchess's heart. Sensing her pain, the Duke gently tells her to rest, sharing her profound sympathy for Judith. A quiet, somber atmosphere settles over the grand parlor as their intimate conversation draws to a close.
Listening from the darkness, the young master is struck by a painful, long-forgotten realization.
He reflects on how Judith's casual demeanor made him overlook the sheer scale of her sacrifices. He bitterly reproaches himself for greedily claiming her affection when he should feel the most shame. He laments his tragic fate, knowing he can never reclaim his true identity as Judith Meius.
Shrouded in shadows, he quietly walks away, trapped in a prison of his own making.
The cold darkness of his secrets swallows him whole, offering no path to redemption. Meanwhile, a completely oblivious Judith sighs as she tries to select a dress for the upcoming banquet. Staring at the mountain of options, she despairs over how she will ever finish choosing one.
She dreads the inevitable consequence if she dares to tell her mother-in-law she cannot decide.
She vividly imagines the extravagant Duchess enthusiastically offering to simply purchase every single gown instead.
Recalling how she barely managed to stop the Duchess's wild spending spree, Judith shudders in amusement. Closing her book, she decides to rest her exhausted mind after such a chaotic day. Lying back on the sofa, a sudden, lingering thought begins to drift into her mind. She recalls how the mysterious master had instantly materialized to shield her during every crisis.
A soft smile graces her lips as she fondly likens him to her own devoted personal knight.
She marvels at his uncanny ability to always arrive at the perfect moment to rescue her. Yet, remembering the warmth of his protective embrace, a strange, unfamiliar feeling begins to bloom. Whenever he holds her close, all of her carefully guarded defenses seem to melt away completely. Having faced life's bitter hardships entirely alone, she never expected to find such profound safety in someone.
Clutching a cushion tightly to her chest, she acknowledges the deep comfort his presence brings.
She realizes that if she ever marries again, she wants a partner just like her master. Realizing she had worried only for him even during the dramatic heir reveal, her heart flutters. Suddenly, she finds it terribly unfair that he remains completely cloaked in masks and secrets. Desperately flustered, she can only recall his incredibly firm chest and impressive athletic physique. Blushing furiously, Judith covers her face, utterly mortified by her own scandalous, unruly thoughts. Suddenly, a polite knock on the door startles Judith right out of her romantic daydream. To her surprise, she quickly recognizes the familiar voice of Dr. Ramus calling out. He politely asks if he can enter her room for a brief late-night conversation. Explaining that he cannot sleep, the young doctor hopes they can share a quiet moment together. Opening the door, Judith's eyes widen in sheer shock to find her masked master lurking right behind Ramus. Panicking at his sudden silent presence, Judith demands to know what on earth he is doing. The master dryly questions if she should be hosting a man who brought wine so late. Completely dumbfounded by the absurd situation unfolding before her, Judith can only stare in disbelief. With effortless poise, the masked master behaves as though his intrusive behavior is perfectly reasonable. His cool composure remains entirely unshaken even as he thoroughly disrupts their late-night meeting. Realizing she needs to handle this bizarre standoff, Judith scrambles to find her voice. Quickly composing herself, she politely dismisses them both, asking to postpone their talk until tomorrow. Bidding a polite good night, Dr. Ramus finally steps out into the quiet evening air. Alone once more, Judith decides to dim the lights to make her rest seem convincing to outsiders. Collapsing onto a nearby chair, the masked master sighs heavily, overwhelmed by sudden jealousy over Hud's late-night visit. Yet, despite his sudden intrusion, a heavy silence begins to settle between the two of them.
He quietly admits his relief that she wasn't upset by his abrupt arrival during her evening preparations.
When he playfully complains about Hud's lack of manners, Judith dryly points out his own hypocrisy. Brushing off her teasing accusation, he admits that being reckless is simply his natural state. His dramatic gesture only highlights his playful arrogance, masking the deep emotions swirling within him. Suspicious of his unusual behavior, she wonders if a sudden family revelation has deeply rattled him. Softly, he recalls her past advice to prioritize his own happiness above all his bitter duties. With a gentle, sincere smile, he resolves to finally try living life on his own terms. She questions if such peace is possible when his maternal wounds leave him feeling so deeply disgusted with himself. He bitterly notes that having high expectations only invites the harshest, most painful disappointments. While he questions why a mother would ever abandon her child, Judith listens with quiet understanding. She remembers her own childhood scars, knowing how desperately hoping for unreturned love only deepens the pain. Looking into his eyes, she gently urges him to let go of the past and find his own happiness. Deeply touched by her warmth, he complains that she has an uncanny knack for seeing right through him. She fiercely advises him to steel his heart and protect his own joy against any maternal interference. Her encouraging words linger in his mind, urging him to pursue his own family's future peace. A warm, genuine smile spreads across his face, entirely captivated by her fierce and protective nature.
Staring at his rare, breathtaking smile, Judith feels a sudden, intense flutter deep within her chest.
Flustered by her racing heart, she frantically tries to deny the blooming romantic feeling she harbors.
Trying to break the tension, she casually asks him to help her select a banquet gown.
When he complains that the designs are far too revealing, she jokingly mocks his overly conservative taste.
She notes that her fake pregnancy calls for simplicity, but her casual tone makes him deeply worry for her.
He reminds her that society expects a husband to proudly escort his pregnant wife to the imperial banquet.
Judith dismisses the concern, smiling as she admits she actually feels more pity for her absent husband.
She raises a finger, explaining that the cruel noble society will certainly judge her situation.
But she gleefully points out that the real social ruin will fall upon her missing spouse instead.
She happily predicts that nobles will brand him an absolute scoundrel for abandoning his pregnant wife.
The master quietly calls her name, deeply unsettled by her fierce condemnation of his hidden identity.
Taking a deep breath, he tentatively asks how she would react if Eki Meius actually returned.
Judith pauses in quiet contemplation, her sharp eyes narrowing as she weighs her honest thoughts.
To his absolute horror, she bluntly declares that she doubts the young lord is even alive anymore. She fiercely asserts that if he is alive, his silence makes him an absolute piece of trash. She argues that ignoring his family's near-fatal poisoning makes him entirely inhuman, despite his quiet shadow assistance. Raising her voice in absolute fury, she condemns him as a coward for watching their suffering from the sidelines. She passionately rants that he should be supporting his crushed parents, completely oblivious to his visible despair. She ruthlessly concludes that if he lives, he is undeniably a degenerate bastard who abandoned his duty. Her own intense anger surprises her, realizing how deeply attached she has grown to the Meius family. The crushed master weakly reminds her of her past affection for Eki Meius, pleading for his defense. She proudly retorts that her old childhood crush is entirely dead, leaving absolutely no lingering feelings behind. Looking away with a soft blush, she adamantly warns him not to get any wrong ideas. He softly asks if those old feelings might reignite upon meeting, unless another has already captured her heart. Her heart leaps as she wonders why he asks with such a somber, deeply expectant expression. As he presses for an answer, her inner thoughts confess her desire to know him much better. She coyly admits that while it isn't love yet, staying close might eventually change her heart. Her honest confession strikes him deeply, leaving him to process her words in quiet, heavy silence. She confirms that nothing is decided, and he can only nod in quiet, relieved agreement.
Yet she silently acknowledges the sweet danger of their growing bond, realizing she is standing at a crossroads.
Staring at her glowing expression, the young master is struck with a sudden burning jealousy, resolving that he cannot simply stand by and let Dr. Hudsoden steal her heart away. Meanwhile, Judith quietly reflects on her unexpected change of heart, never imagining she would feel so deeply swayed the moment her freedom was finally within reach. Resolving to remain cautious until their contract ends, she playfully reminds him of her professionalism before asking when he plans to make his own move. With a soft, hopeful gaze, she declares her desire to quickly build a happy family of her own once she is finally free of her burdens. Her words strike him like lightning, forcing him to nervously ask how she can speak of a new family while planning to abandon Eki Meius. Trembling under his mask, he frantically protests that moving on so quickly is reckless, especially since she barely knows this new man. Conceding his point, Judith agrees that taking things slow and remaining cautious is the wisest path forward. She lists the many traits she intends to carefully test, determined to ensure her next partner is compatible in every aspect of life. But as her intense, vibrant gaze locks onto him, a much deeper, more pressing curiosity begins to take hold. She softly whispers that to truly understand the man she desires, she must first uncover the face hidden beneath his mysterious mask. The sheer audacity of her proclamation sends a jolt of panic straight through his heart, leaving him utterly speechless. Sensing the dangerous turn the conversation has taken, the flustered master hurriedly bids her goodnight and prepares to flee the room. Yet, stopping at the threshold, he hesitates as one final, desperate question lingers on his tongue. He tentatively asks if he may continue visiting her in secret, promising to stay away if his presence causes her any discomfort. Catching himself, he begins to apologize for the intrusion, realizing how inappropriate his late-night visits must seem to an outsider. But Judith merely smiles, teasingly assuring him that her absent husband would surely understand her hosting such a close companion. With a lighter heart, he vanishes into the quiet, starlit night, leaving behind a lingering promise to return. True to his word, the young master finds himself returning to her parlor every single day, unable to resist her magnetic pull. His jealousy flares as he remembers the persistent doctor, knowing that without his constant presence, Judith might actually welcome the man's advances. The unbearable thought of her sharing quiet, intimate late-night drinks with another man drives him to absolute distraction. Knowing Dr. Hudsoden's service would end after the upcoming banquet, the master originally planned to simply block his path until then. However, he suddenly realizes that the true, terrifying battlefield is the grand imperial banquet itself. He vividly imagines Judith spinning across the grand ballroom floor in perfect harmony with the young doctor, looking every bit like a devoted couple. Yet the torture of his imagination does not end with mere glances and matching attire. He tortures himself with thoughts of the unavoidable intimate touches that the crowded, swirling dance floor will force upon them. He dreads the smooth, sweet words the doctor might whisper in her ear, trying to lure her away forever. The haunting vision of Judith flushed and breathless in another man's arms pushes his jealousy to its absolute limit. Gritting his teeth in silent agony, the young master desperately searches for any way to disrupt their inevitable ballroom rendezvous. His dark thoughts are suddenly shattered when Judith gently calls out to him, pulling him back to reality. Shaking off his intense distraction, he listens closely as she reveals she has a serious matter to discuss with him. She explains that with her departure from the Meius dukedom looming just months away, she must plan her future life. Clutching her hands together nervously, she confesses that a deep, unsettling anxiety continues to weigh on her mind.
She admits her profound worry for the vulnerable Meius family, feeling guilty about leaving them behind to chase her own happiness while the Emperor's threat looms.
But his mind completely stalls on her words, panicking as he demands to know why she is suddenly talking about starting a new family.
She casually reminds him of her long-held dream to build a home of her own the moment she secures her freedom, leaving him deeply unsettled.
To his absolute horror, she adds that the man she is targeting already knows every one of her secrets, and most importantly, seems to return her feelings. A chilling realization strikes his heart like ice, convincing him that the man who holds her interest can only be Dr. Hudsoden. Unaware of his internal meltdown, Judith continues to agonize over whether she is being terribly selfish by abandoning the endangered dukedom. When she doubts whether her presence could truly offer any real help to the estate, he sees a golden opportunity. Snapping his fingers in sudden excitement, the young master eagerly jumps on her hesitation, determined to convince her to stay. He eagerly reminds her of how deeply the Duke, Duchess, and Carl adore her, hoping to sway her decision. He cleverly warns that her sudden departure after her fake miscarriage would cast a cold, unforgiving shadow over the family's reputation. Seeing the logic in his words, Judith agrees that society would cruelly assume she was heartlessly cast aside in her time of grief. He presses his advantage, suggesting she stay until Ekian Meius returns, but she flatly dismisses the very idea of his homecoming. When he argues that the young lord might return to protect his family, Judith coldly retorts that he should have done so long ago. The master desperately visualizes Ekian making a grand, heroic entrance at the absolute peak of the crisis, hoping to paint his true identity in a better light. Judith notes that his return would actually be a blessing, allowing her to proceed with their divorce and leave with a completely clear conscience. She adds a crucial piece of rumor she has heard mentioning Ekian's alleged closeness with the crown prince. Taken completely aback, the young master demands to know why she is suddenly bringing up the crown prince. Seeking his trust, Judith prepares to reveal a secret so shocking that she must first ask if he will believe her. Judith calmly assures him that her sources have never failed her, carrying absolute certainty in her voice. She reveals a terrifying truth. At the upcoming banquet, the emperor intends to assassinate his own son. The master gasps at the word assassination as she explains the tyrant's plan to slowly poison the prince's mind and body. Once the addictive drugs completely paralyze the prince's strength, the emperor will strike the final fatal blow. Judith reasons that while the prince would dismiss a direct warning, informing him through his trusted bodyguard will plant the seeds of doubt. Facing such specific, terrifying details, the crown prince will have no choice but to suspect his own imperial father. This suspicion will turn the emperor's enemies against him, giving the Meius family a powerful shield without having to fight directly. Yet, a major obstacle remains. Judith has no direct path to approach the busy prince amidst the heavily guarded birthday celebration. Dumbfounded by the sheer scale of her knowledge, the master demands to know where she could have possibly uncovered such dangerous state secrets. Judith casually attributes her incredible foresight to the final oracle, claiming it is the same source that has guided all her choices. Staring at her in stunned silence, the master sweats nervously, deeply shaken by the unfathomable depth of her secrets. Underneath his shock, his heart swells with profound gratitude that she is risking everything to save his closest ally, the crown prince. Shaking off his chaotic thoughts, the master resolves to focus on the present and softly calls out her name. With a confident and resolute gaze, he assures her that he has a way to help her make contact. Sitting back with poise, he prepares to utilize his hidden influence to secure her the audience she needs. Internally, Judith recalls the tragic future foretold by the oracle, where the prince's kind heart eventually led to his brutal downfall. Because of his deep trust, the noble prince never could have imagined that his power-hungry father would turn against him. But in the original timeline, that naive trust came with a devastating and bloody price. Barely surviving the assassination, the prince was left permanently crippled, only fighting back with the eventual help of the true protagonist. Although he would eventually defeat the tyrant and restore peace, the victory would come far too late for her loved ones.
By the time the dust finally settled, the defenseless Meius family would have already been reduced to absolute ash and ruin.
To alter this grim fate, Judith resolves to shield the prince from harm during the impending imperial banquet. If the crown prince falls tonight, she knows the emperor's unchecked wrath will instantly destroy her adoptive home. Arriving at the palace, she turns to thank Dr. Hudsoden, only to gasp in sudden, breathless surprise. Standing before her is the young doctor, looking exceptionally handsome and striking in his elegant banquet attire. Blushing furiously, Hudsoden stammers nervously, completely overwhelmed by her captivating and radiant presence. Giggling softly at his adorable reaction, Judith teasingly cuts through his nervous, tongue-tied state. She playfully tilts her head, asking if she looks presentable enough for such a grand imperial occasion. Draped in a brilliant red gown, her breathtaking beauty leaves him utterly spellbound as he quietly gasps his heartfelt praise. Beaming with joy, she warmly thanks him for the sweet compliment, completely putting him at ease. Watching from afar, onlookers murmur that while the young doctor is clearly smitten, Judith seems delightfully oblivious. Their quiet bubble is suddenly burst when the Duke and Duchess approach, calling out to the young pair. Bowing respectfully, the flustered doctor quickly greets the high nobles, trying to mask his lingering embarrassment. The Duke sternly announces that it is finally time for them to make their grand entrance into the ballroom. The massive doors swing open as the herald's booming voice echoes across the grand hall announcing the Meius family. A sudden, tense hush sweeps over the glittering crowd as every eye turns toward the grand entrance. Striding forward with unmatched grace, the elegant group commands the absolute attention of the entire room. Intrigued whispers instantly ripple through the ballroom, the air growing thick with gossip and intense curiosity. Guests quietly marvel at their attendance, noting it is their first public appearance since the young lord went missing. As a haughty noblewoman glares with cold disdain, the Duchess swiftly suggests they move away from the prying eyes. Looking away with a quiet sneer, the Duchess mutters about the insufferable, fickle nature of high society. Turning to Judith, she explains that they must greet the Emperor first, gently asking her to wait behind. The Duke reassures his anxious wife, laughing softly as he notes that Judith has the loyal doctor to guard her. Judith warmly assures them she will be fine, but the Duchess hesitates, turning back with a deeply serious expression. She fiercely commands Judith never to tolerate a single shred of disrespect from any of the arrogant nobles. The Duke steps forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous promise to ruthlessly crush anyone who dares look down on her. Touched by their intense parental devotion, Judith smiles brightly and promises to stand tall. She watches with a warm heart as her adoptive parents majestically stride toward the imperial throne. Left alone in the bustling ballroom, Hudsoden shifts nervously, his heart racing as he stands by her side. Gathering his courage, the young doctor tentatively begins to speak, catching Judith completely off guard. Just as Hudsoden nervously musters the courage to ask Judith for a dance, a loud, joyful voice suddenly breaks their quiet moment. His own mother and father eagerly approach him, warmly gushing over how handsome and striking their eldest son looks in his elegant banquet attire. Realizing her excitement got the better of her, the doctor's mother quickly bows and apologizes to Judith for her lack of manners. With immense warmth, they sincerely thank the young Duchess, knowing their attendance tonight was entirely thanks to her generous kindness. Judith watches them with a soft smile, realizing this is their long-awaited moment to proudly introduce their son to high society. Knowing they deserve this precious time together, she gently releases her grip and decides to slip away. She warmly encourages Hudsoden to stay by his parents' side, reminding him that the formal dancing hasn't even begun yet. Assuring him she will be perfectly fine, Judith brightly announces she will step out onto the balcony to enjoy the fresh evening breeze. Deeply touched by her consideration, Hudsoden reluctantly nods, promising to seek her out the moment he is finished. As Judith elegantly walks up the grand staircase alone, the venomous whispers of the surrounding crowd begin to ripple through the air. Jealous noblewomen sneer in disdain, murmuring cruel rumors that she must have used a love potion to seduce the young lord. Stepping out into the cool night air, Judith lets their spiteful gossip fade into the background, refusing to let their jealousy ruin her evening. She chuckles softly to herself, highly amused by the sheer absurdity of the love potion rumor. Brushing the petty whispers aside, she focuses her thoughts entirely on the life of the crown prince, praying her warning will reach him in time. She places her faith in the young master, knowing that securing the prince's safety is the only way to save the Meius family from ruin. Meanwhile, high atop a secluded castle tower, the crown prince stands alone, holding a forged invitation with a mixture of skepticism and hope. His silent wait is suddenly broken when a cloaked figure swiftly drops down, apologizing for the delay in shaking off the imperial guards. The prince's eyes widen in absolute disbelief as he looks at the familiar silhouette, his voice trembling as he whispers Ekien's name. Overwhelmed with sudden emotion, the prince realizes only Ekien would remember the secret hiding spot they shared during their childhood. He desperately asks where his closest friend has been all this time, demanding to know if he is unharmed. Sensing his friend's deep worry, the young master speaks in a gentle tone, formally greeting His Highness after their long separation. Looking up with a nostalgic and gentle smile, the young master is deeply relieved to see his trusted friend once more. The heavy silence between them melts away, replaced by the warmth of a bond that time could never truly break. Unable to contain his relief any longer, the crown prince takes a step forward. In a rare display of raw, unrestrained emotion, the prince pulls Ekian into a tight, fierce embrace. The prince laughs breathlessly, admitting that the painful rumors had led him to believe Ekian was truly dead. Squeezing his eyes shut, Ekian holds his dearest ally close, deeply grateful to stand before him under his true name once again. He silently wonders if he would ever be allowed to experience such a warm, comforting moment of reunion again. But the emotional reunion is abruptly cut short when the prince pulls back, asking if the scandalous rumors surrounding Ekian are true. The prince demands to know if Ekian really got a respectable lady pregnant and heartlessly abandoned his responsibilities to flee the estate. He explains that he never believed the gossip, assuming the duke only created the story to hide Ekian's tragic death. But now, seeing Ekian standing right before him perfectly healthy, the prince realizes there is only one other logical explanation. Amused, yet deeply disappointed, the prince jokingly sighs that his closest friend is apparently turned into irresponsible trash. He playfully asks if Ekian came to borrow money, sell off stolen goods, or feed a sudden gambling addiction. Ekian's playful demeanor instantly vanishes, his face turning deadly serious as he prepares to deliver his warning.
With absolute gravity, Ekian reveals that a highly organized assassination attempt will be made on the prince's life tonight.
The prince gasps in sheer shock, unable to believe someone would dare strike at his own birthday banquet. Ekian details the chilling plan, warning that the deadly strike will happen immediately following the prince's public speech. He reveals the traitor is the knight stationed directly to the prince's right, prompting the prince to defend the loyal guard's honor. Ekian counters by pointing out how heavy and sluggish the prince's movements have felt during his recent training sessions. He exposes the terrifying truth that the prince is being slowly poisoned, warning him to avoid the corrupt royal physicians at all costs. The prince's heart sinks as Ekian silently nods, confirming that the mastermind is indeed his own father, the emperor. Ekian urges him to wear armor under his formal attire and keep a close, vigilant watch over his right side during the speech. A bittersweet smile touches the prince's face as he realizes his loyal friend hasn't changed a single bit. Accepting the warning, the prince sincerely thanks Ekian for risking everything to bring him this vital information. As Ekian prepares to leave, the prince desperately asks for a way to stay in contact, hoping to keep his friend close. He sighs, reminding Ekian of the countless people who are still waiting and grieving for his return to the empire. Ekian quietly apologizes, but the prince smiles knowingly, stating that Ekian needs to see something with his own eyes. Gently guiding Ekian toward the edge of the high balcony, the prince gestures to the bustling ballroom below and asks if he recognizes a certain guest. Ekian looks down into the glittering crowd, his heart completely stopping as his eyes land on the stunning figure of Judith. A soft gasp escapes Ekian's lips as his eyes lock onto Judith, her name escaping his mouth in a breathless whisper. The prince gently teases him about abandoning such a breathtaking beauty, while Ekian stands utterly flustered by his friend's playful skepticism. But the lighthearted tone quickly shifts as the prince mentions a far more dark and troubling rumor about Ekian's sudden disappearance. Ekian's blood runs cold as the prince details a shocking whisper that Judith drugged him and locked him away to bear a child. Slandered as a deceitful temptress, Judith is now viewed by high society as a woman carrying a fatherless Meius heir left completely to the wolves. Observing Ekian's sheer horrified shock, the prince realizes this is the very first time his friend is hearing these vile lies. A dark, terrifying fury ignites in Ekian's eyes as he demands to know the ringleader behind the vicious rumors. The prince meets his deadly gaze, solemnly asking if Ekian intends to execute whoever dared drag Judith's name through the mud. Softening his stance, the crown prince decides to offer his dearest friend some hard-earned wisdom. He acknowledges Ekian's noble intent to stay away, understanding the silent burden of trying to protect a loved one from afar. Yet, he warns that keeping such a distance only blinds you to the suffering of those you left behind. Ekian clenches his fist in silent agony, realizing how defenseless Judith is against the venomous tongues of the nobles. Placing a reassuring hand on Ekian's shoulder, the prince urges him to stop running and protect her by his side. The heavy night breeze sweeps across the high balcony as Ekian quietly processes his friend's powerful words. The prince confesses that he, too, spent years ignoring the terrifying reality of his father's murderous intentions toward him. He admits that without Ekian's warning, he would have died tonight, abandoning his own wife and unborn child to a cruel fate. Ready to face the ultimate consequence, the prince declares he will bear the title of traitor if it means keeping his loved ones safe. Smiling warmly, the prince tells Ekian to finally return to Judith's side and protect his own heart. Overwhelmed with profound respect and gratitude, Ekian softly whispers His Highness's title. Extending his hand, the prince laments that they cannot ignore their heavy duties tonight to simply drink like the old days. He firmly shakes Ekian's hand, promising to wear the protective armor and find a trustworthy physician. As they part, the prince asks for Ekian's continued prayers, promising to pray for his friend's safe return to the light. Stepping back into the dark night, Ekian bitterly reflects on his decision to flee his family's estate. He had truly believed that leaving the Meius name behind was the only path to keeping his loved ones alive. Instead, his absence only allowed a twisted maid to abuse Carl and an imperial spy to poison his beloved parents. He bows his head under the starlit sky, crushed by the realization that his sacrifice brought nothing but misery. Gazing down at Judith, his heart breaks further, knowing his disappearance left her entirely vulnerable to the court's venom. He finally accepts the bitter, undeniable truth. By leaving his family, he protected absolutely nothing. The painful realization strips away his noble excuses, leaving him to face his cowardice for simply running away. With a newfound ironclad resolve, Ekian steps forward, ready to discard his mask and claim his place by Judith's side.